and we're absolutely thrilled to be able to provide a platform today for Birth Family during National Adoption Week to share their stories of loss and hope and change. Today we'll be hearing from different birth families, their perspective, their experiences, touching on letterbox, contact, life for them after the adoption order, the importance of peer support to help birth families. We'll also see some impressive art pieces that our birth parents have produced, and the real importance of memory work with birth families in terms of them processing their grief and their loss. It's been mindful today that we're hearing real experiences from real people, and some of the stories we will be hearing today, some may find difficult to hear. There will be themes such as domestic abuse, mental health, reference to sexual abuse, but we will make sure that before each piece, participants are made aware of particular themes that are about to be discussed. We want to assure people that we are here to support if they're affected by anything they hear today. Our advice line number will be shown periodically throughout the day. We have extended hours on our advice line for the rest of the week. I'm also conscious that we're a mixed group today of birth parents, adopters, prospective adopters, social workers and other professionals. And it's important that we are able to have this space together to respectfully hear birth parents. And I'm very much looking forward to the speakers that we've got lined up for you today. And without further ado, I shall introduce our host for the day, Angela Fraser-Wicks.
Lovely, thanks Emma. Good morning everyone, and a very warm welcome to today's event. As Emma said, I will be your host for today, so I'll just introduce myself and tell you a little bit more about me. I'm Angela Fraser-Wicks and I am a birth mum. I lost my eldest two children to adoption way back in 2004. It was predominantly due to being the victim of domestic abuse. I am now happily married with a 10-year-old daughter who's had no local authority involvement whatsoever. And shortly before Christmas last year, I was reunited with my eldest son, who is now 22 and lives in Australia. I am a trustee of the charity, the Family Rights Group, and the number for their advice line will also be shared throughout today so that there's another place where you can reach out for if you need advice. As well as being a trustee of Family Rights Group, I'm a founding member of their Parents Panel, which is one of the expert panels made up of people with lived experience of the child welfare and family justice system. I've worked with FRG for 13 years, trying to raise awareness of the issues facing families involved in the family justice system, especially those impacted by adoption. As well as my role at Family Rights Group, I sit on the advisory board for the Born into Care study at Lancaster University, and I'm co-chair of CAFCAS's Learning and Improvement Board, which is looking at the way they work with families where domestic abuse is featured. The board is made up of professionals and people with lived experience, and I support them to interact. I also worked with CAFCAS, helping them set up their family forum, which recently welcomed its founding members, and it's hoped that by sharing their lived experience, they can influence CAFCAS policy and practice. I've delivered training to adoption practitioners and to adopters, helping them see adoption from a birth family's perspective. I sit on many other panels and steering groups, but I'm not going to bore you with the entire list right now. Thanks to my work with the Family Rights Group and this event today, I can feel a real shift happening in the way that birth families are seen and heard. For years, this week, National Adoption Week, for me was always seen as it was around adopter recruitment or finding families for children waiting to be adopted. It was an awful week, full of painful reminders of what could have been, a time for reliving the trauma and the suffering that the loss of our children had caused us. We were often left with no one to talk to and no support. This year, I'm so pleased to see things being done differently, to see this week being used as a time to share the reality of adoption, not just for adopters, but for us too. Birth family have always been the forgotten side to adoption, the ones no one wanted to acknowledge, and this change is long overdue. Despite all these changes, nothing will change the sense of grief and loss that we all feel. Nothing will bring back our children. Today, as for the rest of the week, will hurt. We will be hearing from some exceptionally brave family members today. They will talk of their loss, how they have found support, their experiences of contact, both good and bad. None of the people speaking here today do it because it will change anything for themselves. Talking will not change the past. They are speaking today to try and raise awareness, to use their experiences to help others, whether it's by shining a light on the reasons their child was removed, sharing the way support groups and projects have helped them, or sharing personal insights about contact. All of this is done for others, and I want to take a moment to celebrate their bravery and selflessness in speaking today. I know all too well how hard it is to share what is, for most of us, the worst thing we will ever experience in our lifetimes. Before we start, I must warn you all that today could be potentially triggering, that hearing others speak will remind you of your own loss and pain, and that you may need someone to talk to about how you're feeling. As Emma mentioned, the PAC-UK advice line has been extended so that there is support available for you if you need it. The number will be on screen, in the chat, and repeated throughout today's event, alongside the number for Family Rights Group advice line. Please, if you need help, then reach out. Whilst it's important that today raises awareness and hopefully brings about change for others, that must never come at the cost of anyone else's mental well-being. We care about all of you here today, and we are so grateful to you for giving up the time to attend. We have intentionally left the chat muted, as we don't have the capacity to monitor it or offer individual support. We will, however, be opening the chat during the break to allow you to post questions for our panel. The panel will be made up of professionals working with birth families and family members themselves. And we now have some housekeeping that I'm just going to quickly run through before I hand over to our first speaker. The first one, obviously, I think is extremely important. We just ask you to remain respectful. There may be lots of different opinions shared throughout today, and we all come at this from a very different perspective. But today is about listening and understanding the perspectives of the speakers that we have and the panel members that we have. Please do ask us questions for us to cover during the panel discussion. Apologies, we won't be able to answer all of the questions, but we will try and get to the ones that we seem to see happen, being entered the most frequently. And again, the self-care, please do reach out if you need any support, and we will try our best to capture the themes from the questions in the chat in our panel later on today. I hope that you find the presentations helpful and enlightening, but please do reach out for help if you find them triggering. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Emma Crowther-Duncan, who's going to start off today's event.
Next, we have a recording that I'm going to share with you now. And then after that recording, we're lucky enough to have birth mum here with us today, Raj, and I'll be talking with her just to expand a little bit more after this recording.
Geddes. I'm a lecturer in social work at Leeds Beckett University, and I'm here with Badge. Hi, Badge.
Hiya.
Badge isn't your real name, is it? But we've chosen a pretend name to protect your identity and the identity of your child.
Correct.
So we're just going to have a conversation today about your experience of adoption, really, Badge. And just to say again that if there's anything that I ask you that you feel uncomfortable with, or if you need to have a break, please feel free to let me know, and you'll obviously have the chance to hear this as well before it goes anywhere else. Does that sound all right?
Yeah, I'm here.
Oh, great. Okay. So first of all, Badge, please could you just tell us a little bit about how you came to be involved in adoption?
Well, in 2016, my daughter, aged 3.5, was removed from my care due to me being a victim of domestic abuse. Obviously, she was under a Section 20 and placed into foster care. We had a 19-month court battle where I was assessed, family was assessed, and then the social worker basically said there was no one suitable, so they went back to the courts and asked for a full placement order to place her for adoption. She was adopted, placed, and then adopted the following year. So now I'm classed as a birth mum.
Okay, thank you for explaining that, Badge. So I know one of the things that we've spoken about before we had this conversation is about the things that you've got from when your daughter was in your care that you've kind of held on to and the way that they've kind of maybe helped you over the years. Would you mind just talking to us a little bit about that?
I have a special little box that has got a face dummy in it first blanket and a little teddy cat. We've got some little dogs in there, what she used to collect in tins. Best £1 I've ever spent. And it's got just like a first hat. It's got a RD bracelet in there when they're born. And obviously these things tell a story of me and her and our memories from when she was at home with me.
Yeah, okay, thank you. So you mentioned to me again the other day about birthdays, and we know there's been lots of research about when adopted children have birthdays or at Christmas time or Mother's Day, that can be really, really hard for birth families. Can you tell us a little bit about how you manage those days, particularly the objects that you use to manage those days?
On a birthday, I always get the blanket out, and we get cards and things to keep here, and they go into the box too. And a balloon with the age that she is that year, and then I pop it and that goes into a box too. And the same with Mother's Day, I get little things out the box, and then I also look at Mother's Day card she wrote me whilst in foster care, and she wrote that to contact the day after Mother's Day. So I always look at that and I stand that up on Mother's Day. My mum gets me a card from my daughter, but obviously she has to sign it. And then like Christmas time, I do this exactly the same thing. We have a little box that's got Christmas presents in it. So at the minute that just commences, and she's got a bracelet what you can put charms on, what she already had. So I've been getting like a Christmas charm each year and been filling that up. Like a snow dome, a little one, or a burble, and I write the year of that Christmas and it goes into the box, so that when she's older, if I do eventually see her again, I can give her all these things and she knows that I never forgot about her at birthdays and Christmas and things like that.
Thank you. So that sounds like loads of stuff that you're doing throughout the year then to kind of keep that connection. Is that what you're doing there, do you think, with that?
Yeah, I do, and I sometimes reread my letters what I get, and that helps. But then also sometimes it does make you feel worse. But I try to always think of the positives to everything, which then makes you feel a little less emotional. But that's how I deal with things. I know them things are there. I know I can look at them anytime I want, which really, 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 really helps me.
You mentioned your mum earlier. You said that your mum sometimes kind of signs a birthday card on behalf of your daughter. And one of the things that we kind of sometimes miss in adoption is that adoption has an impact on not just, birth mums and birth dads, but also on the wider family. Can you talk a little bit about the impact you think that your daughter's adoptions had on your wider family?
My child's adoption affected my dad, so her granddad, the most. It's only been in the last 6 months that he's talking to me again. I go to his house a lot more now and things like that, so it really affected him. And I think that was as well, like, while she was under a child protection plan, he supervised her dad's contact. So my dad was like really, really involved in her life, maybe a little bit more than a granddad, due to her as having social work involved in the same as a safe person and things like that. And obviously it has affected my mum a really, really lot, because her and my little girl was really close. But luckily it hasn't affected mine and my mum's relationship. I'd say she's been there for me all my life, but during the time she was removed and the courts and everything, my mum was like my rock, and obviously they haven't seen her since she was 3. They was due to come home a fortnight after she was removed, so they didn't even get to say bye or anything to her.
And it sounds like that you talk about your little girl still with your family, is that right? You kind of have those conversations with her. She's still kind of...
we still have conversations around things she used to do, or like if something comes on the telly or we see something, like she absolutely loves cats, like myself. So if we see little things like that, we talk about her, and my family still send her a birthday card, which goes in the box with mine. And obviously when I get my letters, my mum and dad get letters too. So obviously we talk about the things that they've told us, what she's now doing and the things that she now likes and things like that.
Great. It would be great to talk a little bit more about letters, because I know you've had letterbox contact, haven't you, since your daughter was adopted? And I think you've had, from what you've said to me, quite a good experience, would you say, of letterbox contact?
Yeah, I can say I've got a very positive experience of letterbox. The 3 letters I've received up to now have always been on time in the month that they say they're going to be. My little girl writes a separate letter too, so that's really nice that she writes, so I know she's involved in the letterbox contact, and I know that they tell me that she is excited to get a respond from us. So I know she reads our letters, as some people put them away till they're older. But given that she's 8 now, obviously she's at an age where she understands who I am. She understands what she wants me to know and what she don't want me to know. In my experience, it's very positive. I have quite a positive relationship with the letterbox team as well, where I live. They're always really helpful. They do a support thing where, obviously because of COVID, they haven't had it for the last year or so. They were still there to help you over the telephone. They support birth mums with writing your letters back and what things can be positive to put in, but so that it don't come across as though you're being too emotional, or it could affect them, or like upset the child or whatever. And I think that's really good that I have that option, and other people where I live have that option too. And that's what, for future things, I think that's what a lot needs to be done, more support around letterbox, and then people can see it can be a two-way thing, it can be a really positive thing. Like mine is very positive. I can't say anything negative about it. To be fair, obviously, yeah, I'd like more letters, but I understand that at this specific time, I can only have, obviously, what we've all agreed to, which that's really important, and they really mean a really lot to me. And means a lot to me about the things they tell me, and they always tell me a memory what my little girl shared with them about their family, whether that's me, my mum or dad, or her birth dad. Which I think is really nice that they mention things like that in their letter, because that then tells me that they know I'm important, but also that she'll always know who I am, and that although I made bad choices and I didn't always do the right things, she knows that she's loved and that she'll always be loved, and that my door is always open for whenever she's ready, when she's older, to come and find me.
Yeah, thank you. So that sounds quite important, that you know that your daughter is able to talk about her past, and that's part of her life now, that it's kind of spoken about in the adoptive family. Yeah. And then obviously there's that hope that you have as well for your future as part of that too. So in terms of what you were saying about contact, it sounded like the helpful things were that it's on time. You don't have to kind of have that anxiety about waiting for letters. Yeah, and also that your daughter's quite involved, it sounds like, in the contact. That sounds like a really important thing, that you know that she's part of it.
Yeah, she does. She tells us, like, little things she tells us, and she'll say, like, the last letter we received, she'd said to me, "Don't worry about me, because I'm happy and I'm safe and none of us have had COVID." Oh. So she's quite intelligent for her age. She always has been quite forward with things. Yeah. But yeah, it is really nice when the child is involved in that too, whether that's a picture, in my case a letter, or even if that's just them sending a photo of something they like or have them. It's really nice that adoptive parents, they come across to me like they are very open with her. And they always say about, like, a life story where she knows where that is, she can read that anytime she wants. She's got photos, and she's got little keepsakes in a box like I have, and they've said she's allowed to look at them whenever, get them out whenever she wants. So in my case, my letterbox is really, really positive, and I'm glad it's like that, because that's obviously my only link to my child. And that's all. That one letter won't pay you. It's no one will ever know until you stand in my shoes how important and how much just that tiny bit of paper means.
Okay, thank you so much for that. So hopefully there's going to be some social workers and adopters and some birth parents listening to this. So have you got anything that you'd like to say to kind of social workers, first of all, working in this area, or adopters who might be kind of supporting an adopted child?
Just to know that their family are important, and like we're the first people they knew. If, especially in my case, my child was an older child. So I think adopters need to know that we're not just what's wrote on a report, and that at that time we did what we thought was best, but in the eyes of a social worker in the courts it maybe wasn't. And obviously in my own experiences, I feel that social workers need to do more work around understanding a victim of domestic abuse, and sometimes why they don't just leave, or why they put up with it, why they don't send them to prison and all the rest of it. I think a lot of social workers need to do a lot of work around that and have a lot more understanding. And so from my experience, I'd say not to be as judgmental, or not to come across as though they're being really judgmental. Obviously, I understand from an adopter's perspective, obviously they only know what they're told about us. So I understand sometimes maybe why they do feel like the birth family's a risk, or they didn't protect her, or they failed this or they failed that. Because obviously they only get to know like what's the bad part, what's happened, and the crap stuff. And they don't know anything about me. They've never met me. And until my daughter went to live with them, and now they've got to know her, they didn't really know anything about any of her apart from what was wrote on a piece of paper, and that's from a social worker. So I'd just say more like, I think they need to know more about like the good things that did happen at home, and that some children do have good memories of their family, and I'd say more than anything just around judgment, and for their families to have a little bit more support once adoption's gone through, or that's the plan when they get a full placement order and they start looking for them potential adopters. I think there should be more support around that, and support for adopters as well that obviously are adopting a child or children, given any age. Obviously they all come with certain issues for being removed, and I mean unfortunately some children are abused at home, so they come with extra baggage. So I think support needs to be there for the adopters, and with Letterbox too, so that they can see how important it is to a birth family, but also how important it is for them to find things out. Because obviously if it's not like a three-way thing, then some birth families end up where they won't give no information about health or any family history, or like maybe what the child's favourite food was at home and things like that. I was quite open with things like that, and I've tried to update them as much as I can, i.e. medical problems, which to be fair, there would have been already, most of them they'd have already been aware of, because I had them, some of their medical issues was ongoing. So like the diabetes, I had that in pregnancy. So they already know about that. But if anything else crops up, I tend to just ring the Letterbox team and ask them if they would just pass the information over.
What about to birth parents? If there's any birth parents who hear you speak about this, is there anything you want to say to birth parents?
Just to understand that they're not alone, and not to feel like it's all their fault, and that the children hate them because they're dirt, and just to sort of carry on and be strong, try and be positive, get yourself some support network or join groups around stuff like that. I'm with PAC-UK, and they do a lot of work with birth families and birth parents. I'm a parents panel member of FRG as well, and they do a lot of work with parents. That's even with them that have not a birth parent yet. If adoption's a plan, they do a lot of work with like the legal side of things, and just so you know where you stand and you know what your rights are. And if anything is offered to them support-wise, that my advice would be to take it. I wouldn't dare to think where I'd be in my life now if it weren't for like the support that I've had.
Thank you so much for speaking to me today. It's really a hopeful message I think you've given today, so thank you.
Well, I told you it would all be worth the wait, and I'm sure you can all agree that it was. And I believe, am I right in thinking now we have Emma and Badge who are going to
We're lucky enough today to have Badge with us to answer a few more questions and just talk a little bit further about her recording. Is that okay, Badge?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Are you okay with your camera on, Badge?
Yeah, that's fine.
Badge, I know when we've talked and when you've talked in your video, we've talked a little bit about how adoption has affected the wider family. And I wonder if you could maybe just expand on that a little bit for us, for people to hear.
Well, my daughter's adoption affected her grandparents the most, other than obviously me, as they deeply miss her a lot. But my mum found it really important to be able to write a later life letter and to get yearly letters through the letterbox system from her too.
Mum did write a piece for us today, didn't she? And
Yeah.
am I still okay to read that out?
That's fine.
Okay. So, I am Nana to a child that is adopted, and I wanted to share with you how important it is for people like me to still be a part of my grandchild's life via the letterbox system. It's important that the correct support is there. I get a letter from my grandchild, and the letter always includes a memory she has shared about me, and the adopters always ask things that we have done to share as well. They tell us a lot about how she's doing, what she likes, and it never comes across that they're rubbing it in my face. I still get called Nana, and I want them and others to know that it's me, what it means to me and my granddaughter, and I hope it helps others to think about grandparents in the future. And I guess that's a really important message today, isn't it, about kind of the impact that, you know, that adoption has on the wider family. And I'm really grateful that we've been able to have that from your mum today as well. I know you've talked about letterbox, and I wonder if you could maybe just share a little bit more about how important it was to actually get those physical letters, because I know a lot of letterbox is kind of done over email, especially sort of during COVID.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you maybe want to talk about that a little bit, about how important it was about having a physical letter?
I get a letter from my little girl, and obviously she's wrote that herself, so she's actually touched that paper, and that means more than anything in the world. And the fact that she's took time to think about what she wants me to know, like I get to then see her handwriting and how lovely her handwriting is and how she's coming on in that way. And just like the adopters, they've been able to ask me questions about, she'd lost her first 2 teeth, which there was the same first 2 teeth she got, and was able to exchange the ages of the time she was at them things. It's really warming and grateful that they keep to the agreed month and that they always write. And I found it really, really, really nice that the letterbox system support me with my writing, because sometimes I find it hard in what to write, so that it don't come across as though I'm being too pushy or I'm being emotional or anything like that. But mainly, although their letter is really important, the most important one is from a little girl. So obviously that's her own letter.
And I think it's really important, isn't it, as we've discussed before, about, you know, where some parents find it really difficult to write those letters.
Yeah,
it's about adopters and family, just please keep on writing.
Yeah, that's the message I'd like to get out there, is just keep writing. And although it's difficult, and it really is, hopefully the support will be there for everyone, and that's what I'd like. So you're able to respond to each letter you're given, and over the period of the years you might get more, then they might become open to other forms of contact, even if that's just other things through letterbox, like photos and things like that.
And I know you were able to contribute to your child's life story work as well, weren't you? And I wonder if you could share how important that was for you to be able to do that.
Yeah, it was really important for me to be able to do that, because then I know that the information she was given was correct, and also that my girl will know when she reads that I was able to contribute to that for her, and I did that for her, so she knows think about herself. So obviously when children get older, they do start asking about her, where was I born, what was the time. I know that all that information in there is correct. It's from me, not what social workers wrote about her, and stuff like that. And I was able to pass. They asked for some photos of like how old she was when she was crawling and things like that, and so all them are in, and my family was able to put all of us at like a later life letter in there for her too, which obviously we had to make it age appropriate, because obviously she could want to read them now, or they might have took them out and maybe wait until she's a bit older. But I found that really, really helpful.
Thank you for sharing your story, and for talking to us afterwards as well. We really appreciate it.
You're welcome.
I'll hand back to Angela.
Thanks, Emma, and thanks so much, Badge. I'm very proud to call you a fellow panel member and a friend, and I'm so grateful to you for doing all of that. And also a special thanks to your mum for taking the time to write something for us. It really is very much appreciated. There's so many things about what you shared sort of stuck out for me. I think one of the big ones was the way you talked about the feeling of the letter and knowing that she touched it. And I understand that completely, because that used to be the important thing to me. I loved what was in the letter, obviously, but just knowing that my sons had touched that piece of paper was a link that I think is quite hard to put into words, but you did it extremely eloquently. And I think as well the issue around the importance of support really came through in what you were saying, and like you said, it's very much the same for me. I don't know where I'd have ended up if it hadn't been for the support that I've received as well. And it sort of really makes you appreciate the professional support that can be put in place and how much it can help you sort of get through what you're going through. You know, we never move on, we live with it every day, but by having that support and events like this, it gives us something to look forward to, something to work towards. So a big thank you to everybody who supported you as well. And the thing about the grandparents as well, and grandparents not being allowed to say goodbye, I found that really quite difficult to hear, and sort of it makes me think, you know, why? And I think I'd like to think that people listening would really understand the importance of that as well, and hopefully ensure it's something that changes in their practice, because I think that's an exceptionally important thing for them to take away from today, and that we're not just what's in a report. And you're right, we are a great deal more than that. But just again, thank you to both of you for sharing your experiences today. I'm now going to go across to, sorry, I have things written down in so many different places. I have to make sure I get people's names right and where they're from. So we have Siobhan Beckwith from the Mothers Apart Common Threads Collective, with Dr. Lisa Morris and Lynn Ambler. So it's over to you guys. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Siobhan Beckwith, as Angela just said, and I'm 1/5 of the Mothers Apart Common Threads Collective at the Women's Centre in Kirklees. And so I also co-founded the Mums Apart group in Kirklees in 2008. So our work now aims to highlight the experiences of separation for mums and their families, and be parts of research and discussion around policy which affects their lives, their families and their communities. So as a collective, we're very passionate about issues affecting the community of women, and believe that women deserve and their families deserve better access to support, and for all their voices to be heard. So we are really pleased to be invited to come along today. What a fabulous event. I think these events are really important because they place experience right at the centre of what they're doing, and that means that when experience is at the centre of it, we are working towards the change that needs to happen for the better of everybody, really. So we're going to talk today about, firstly, a project that myself and Lynn and some other women worked on during lockdown, about lockdown. And then we're going to be joined by Lisa from Lancaster about a new project that we're working on together. So I'm going to talk about the lockdown project and share some of the images and some of the recordings from some of the women who were involved. Okay. So this collective that I'm part of is made up of 5 women, 4 myself and 4 women who have personal experience of living apart from children. And we've all been working together for a long time now on the Mums Apart project in Kirklees. And so I bring my experience as a researcher and as a worker, and my colleagues bring along their personal experiences, as well as all the things that they've learned along the way from life and the work we've done together. So the thing that we've got together, I suppose, in common as women, mothers, writers, activists and teachers, and what we try to do is look at the way that we can create more dialogue, I suppose. So our project that we're going to speak about today is called I Had to Dig Deep. And it was done pretty much entirely via text, WhatsApp, phone, email, Zoom, Teams, paper, envelope and stamped. And explored the experiences of Mums Apart during the pandemic last year. So we worked with 19 women took part in our project. And those women were all apart from some or all of their children, and many of those women's children had been adopted. And I think what's coming through today and what came through in our project was that importance of being able to speak and to have a voice, for that voice to be heard as well, and the benefits that this has for the person speaking about their experiences, but also for the people who really actively listen to what they're saying. So early on in lockdown, when we all locked down, we began to meet online, and it was new for all of us, and we had to learn together. Some of us are better at tech than others. I'm less good at tech, so let's hope today goes okay. And we started, just sharing what was going on for each other, sharing motivational quotes, like pictures of what was going on in our gardens or in our houses. And we talked about what was going on for us, but also we had a real concern, a shared concern for other people who were not able to connect in with groups or with friends in these times. Connecting's always been a really important part of the work we do. Realising that you're not the only one, being able to share your experiences in a safe and supportive environment, and begin to better understand ourselves has been the thread through all of our work. And we noticed that the women that we knew were facing particular challenges as we all went into lockdown. Women were struggling with what the restrictions would mean for them and their family. And lots of women had known some form of isolation or lockdown before. One woman was very much reminded of the time that she spent under section in a psychiatric ward a few years ago. Lots of reasons, shame, stigma, for whatever was going on, lots of women had already been living in a fairly isolated existence. So there was this global situation all around the world, but privately women had their own challenges. How are we going to connect? We knew that this time in history was sort of intensifying difficult experiences that women were having already. The women whose children had been adopted, the wondering that always exists, seemed to just intensify and magnify. And as we were scrolling through social media, looking at the news on our phones, on our laptops, we noticed that we were often drawn to images and pictures that represented what were going on. And that old saying, isn't it, that a picture paints 1,000 words, came to mind. So we wanted together to create some images to help tell stories of this time in history for the women in our project. So we invited women to share their writing, photography or sketches, anything which reflected their experience of isolation. And we then worked together as a collective, and we shared what people had sent to us with an artist called Candice Powin. Some of us had already worked with her before. Because we've got a history of using creativity, and I think that'll come through today, just the importance of being able to get feelings out in ways other than just talking or just writing. And we were really clear that the process of making these resources had to be therapeutic, as well as the outcome being useful for women and for this community. So it was quite tight in terms of time. We locked down in March. We applied for funding in June. The project started in August. We collected material between September and December, and then Candice created all the artwork over the Christmas break. And as the pieces arrived, we joined up as a collective, and we read and we looked at all the pieces online together and began the process of editing. Okay, but I'm just going to now just share a recording by one of the women from the collective about this project. So fingers crossed for tech here at this stage.
Hopefully we've got Mike on standby for questions just in case. But
Can people see Louise there?
yes.
Yeah. Okay. So this is a recording from Louise, who can't be here today.
So my name's Louise, and I'm a member of the Mothers Apart Common Thread Collection in Huddersfield. I have a son who is 9 years old, who was adopted when he was 1 year old. Sorry I can't be there with you live for your event. It would be nice if I could, but I can't at this time. I wanted to tell you a bit about myself, my work with the collective and the project we did during the lockdown. I got involved with the Women's Centre around 8.5 years ago, just before my son adopted. Went through to get support from the Mothers Apart from their children project. I am now involved in our latest project, which you will be hearing about today from Siobhan and Lynn. After going to the group for a while, I got involved in writing our book called In Our Hearts, which is nearly 50 other women, all apart from their children. I was proud of that work, and I never thought I would be an author in a book. I also helped Siobhan do the Make Sense group for new mums to help them process their experience. I really enjoyed that, helping other women who are coming for the first time. I could help them when they were really nervous to feel comfortable and realise it's good for them to begin to trust people and open up. Sometimes through it was emotional, especially if I was struggling or if the women had a similar experience than me. Now I mostly work on projects and deliver training. We do teach at the University of Huddersfield every year, speaking about experiences with social worker students and how they can help families more. I also do training for people who want to adopt. We meet up with groups of adopters and speak about our experiences so they can have our insight into what happens before a child comes to them. Letterbox contact is really important, so we encourage them to write to their children's family and describe what kind of letters we would like to receive, and also what it's like when your letter doesn't come. I don't get letterbox contact from my son's adopters anymore. We want to break down the stereotype about birth families so they can see that we're human beings. We talk to them about the fact they have to go through assessments and that we do too. Even though they are very different assessments, it's important to find some common ground. I love doing the sessions because I enjoy meeting all the doctors and I feel like I'm making a difference and I get to help Siobhan. Today we're gonna tell you about our lockdown project. I have to dig deep. You will hear one of my pieces shortly, but I want to tell you why being involved and connecting with other women in a safe way is good for me. Being at home with my thoughts wasn't easy. I know it sounds awful, but speaking to anyone was a change from four walls. Once we started, it was good to be working on something together because it was linking us up with other women who were having a hard time. We were kind of leading the project, but it was good for us to read everyone's pieces and look at pictures. This was all over Zoom, but it still felt like it was a proper project, and we made our small book. Hearing about other people's difficulties helped me deal with my emotions. I haven't got my son with me, but keeping busy, being with people and helping others is good for me.
Yeah, so that was Louise's piece, which she'd recorded in one go, which is really impressive, and so nice to have Louise's contribution there. And we were really touched about how warmly women responded to our project invitation. It seemed to strike a chord, really. It was, like Louise said, it was an opportunity to be part of something bigger and meaningful at a time when lots of our lives felt quite shrunken. When I invited Rose, she said that that sounds nice. I finished with my mental health worker because they're so pleased with how far I've come. I'm a bit isolated, really. I'd like that. Shortly after, she posted a story of her lockdown. Helen told us I'd just finished counselling, and my counsellor says when I can't get stuff out of my head, I need to try and write it down because I'm good at writing. It's just that I'm not good at talking about my feelings. And this project was perfect for her. And again, we received her piece shortly afterwards. But for other women, it was a challenge writing. Aisha told us that my creativity is verbal, speaking it out. I talk to myself a lot. I can't stop chuntering. I've had to learn patience, taking every day to see what it brings. So for her and a number of women, we chatted to them over the phone and took notes, which were then typed and shared for approval. And then any changes that needed to be made were made before sharing with the rest of the collective. I suppose what we tried to do was make sure that if women wanted to take part, we could find a way and be flexible to make sure that they could. All our work is around mental health and well-being, so it was important that we took care of all the women that were contributing so generously and kindly. Some very difficult experiences. Sometimes we would check in with women afterwards and to see how they were doing. And so for one woman, she told me, "Thank you for the chance to vent. I hope it's heard by social workers, etc." Another message, "I'm kind of pissed off, but a lot more free." Another said, "It was a pleasure, to be honest. It helped me massively." Smiley face at the end of the text. So now I'm going to share some of the images and some of the readings of the project with you. So you can see, and then I'll speak a little bit about that relationship, how we got from the words to the images. So again, let's just fingers crossed for sharing screen.
Actually, while we're waiting, I just wanted to say what had really come through in what we were hearing from Louise was the importance of listening to people with lived experience when it comes to teaching and training. You know, not just for social work students, but for adopters as well. I thought that was so important. And also to reshare that In Our Hearts book, you know, the stories of 50 other women and how important it is for those voices to be shared. So I think it's a huge achievement on behalf of the project and the people involved.
Thank you, Angela. I think I'm ready.
Here we go. Fingers crossed, guys.
When lockdown happened, I wasn't sure what to do. I am supposed to get a letter every April, and then I have 3 weeks to reply. Last spring, I was in a bad way, and I didn't know what to say to them. So I missed that year. 1 year, though, they were late. August it came. If I was that late, I would have missed my opportunity. Social workers always say that sibling contact is really important, so my eldest kids get to see each other. One's in foster care and the other's been adopted. Plus, I have my youngest at home. I am supposed to see my eldest who was in foster care. The thing is, my youngest gets to see none of them because she is with me. So I must be the problem here, mustn't I? So siblings don't matter when it comes to my youngest. I'd be happy for the carers to take my daughter out for tea if they've got to know her. It makes me sad for the kids. It's hard for them to understand, like this lockdown. We sit and shout at Boris Johnson on the telly I don't feel sorry for the adults, it's the kids. My youngest goes to school and she can see her friends, but she can't do trick or treat outside with them. No firework display. It doesn't make sense to me, remind her.
I don't like being on my own for a long period of time. I had to face that. There were days I was okay with that, and days that I wasn't. Usually, I can't do more than a couple of days. It's too much. I spent the first lockdown really worried about my son and his family. I hear they were okay in the first lockdown, but now we are going into another one, and I don't know whether I can ask about him again. Would they let me know if anything has changed?
Everything has stopped. It feels like the end. Should I be sad? Do I have to pretend? I'm happy to sit. I'm happy to walk. No pressure to do, no pressure to talk. I don't want to be sad. Don't want to deny that this time has shown me new ways I can fly. I want to rise up, fly high in the air, 'cause this life can be cruel. This life isn't fair. I don't want to look back. I have for too long. But it hurts me too much and I want to be strong. I can't change the past. That time is now gone. I have to look forwards. It's time to move on. I'm grasping this life and all that I see. I've found in this time new ways to break free, new ways to find hope, new places to be. I've still lost my children, but it won't define me.
That's just three pieces from the wider project, and it was, I have to say, a real delight. I was at home in my home, processing everything that was going on around in the world, and just being able to connect with other women who were also isolated in very different ways. It was a really powerful experience for everybody involved, and we did wonder whether we'd be able to get enough contributions. And obviously, then you get to the point where having to make decisions about editing and how to do justice to all that we receive. Key to the sharing of the material with Candice, the artist, and giving her a sense of the project, and negotiating the path from the masses of material that we had to the 9 pieces of artwork she created, and the design of this illustrated book. All of that came down to trust. It's just like any other relationship, we had to build trust, just like with friends, families, social workers, solicitors. We all have our own relationships with trust. So throughout the images, you'll see circles, and so these circles were very much kind of linked to the idea of a social bubble. So the social bubble, the kind of protecting the people inside, but I guess we were really aware of all the people that were outside of those bubbles. Many of the women in our project, most of the women in our project, outside of the bubbles that their children were in. And everyone experienced social isolation differently and faced really different challenges. And as well as kind of these challenges, there was the reflection that was brought, that friendships and relationships took on a really different energy. And I think you could really see that, hear that in the last piece. Aisha told us, it's been hell on one side. I had to dig deep. There was this huge mental block, and it's taken lockdown to do all this. I'm focused and I feel good, empowered in a way that I wouldn't if I hadn't gone through it. The experiences were varied, and each piece was a snapshot in a woman's life at the point that they were created. So COVID's been affecting our lives now for 18 months, and there'll be repercussions as we go forward for a long time. But we believe that in sharing stories, which tend not to be heard very often, we can all learn. And the stories in our project are about mums during lockdown, living apart from their children, but they shine a light on lives generally. So, a huge thank you to everyone that contributed to this project. The book could have been 100 pages. We've got much more to share about our project. And if you'd like a copy, on the last slide that I'm going to show in a second, there's the website page, so you can have a look there. But throughout this part of the presentation, I'm going to leave you with a recording by Jenny, one of our collective members, and on one of the slides. So this slide is a little image, and it was based on a little sketch that we were sent by one of the women, which attendees then kind of stylised to match the rest of the project. So let me get this final slide ready for you, and we can.
Going for 3 out of 3 here, Siobhan. So.
Oh, no, I'm repeating. Hang on.
We're all going to be experts of this by the time we're eventually let out again. Then we just all have to remember to wear trousers.
I really like the book. The words and the pictures really tell the story of pain, joy, heartbreak, isolation, loneliness, and love. I became involved with this project because I care. I know so many mums who are living apart from their children, mums who I am proud to call friends. This is often because of unforeseen circumstances or women who have experienced generational issues, domestic violence and abuse, being vulnerable, having learning difficulties, being forced into activities they could not say no to, mums who had their children or child taken away from birth, some not even given a chance to be a mum. Some of my friends have passed on, still fighting their history of drugs, addictions due to personal circumstances, or due to being groomed, due to gangs, due to their mum not being able to be with them or look after them. We want those involved with our children to remember one day they will be grown up and look back on their life. Memories of years spent in custody battles, hearing parents argue, or maybe seeing domestic violence. They may feel alienated from one parent, rejected, not loved. I believe children deserve the care that mums are not able to give whilst apart, to be looked after as individuals, to be listened to, and to be able to build trust and rapport, to feel important and wanted. They may not be able to cope with life as they grow. They may have difficulties communicating and in education. They may have fallen behind. Mental health may be an issue for the child. They may be withdrawn or unable to control their emotions, their anger, anxiety, being stressed, feeling guilty, feeling to blame. There are thousands of unknowns, but right now what those with power need to know and understand is that our children need, most of all, is someone to listen to them and hear their words. They want to feel loved, not to be in fear of telling the truth from their own perspective, to know that parents still love them and care, and that they have not been abandoned for anything they did wrong. They need to be treated as an individual, not just a case number or reference file, not just getting through the pile of files, not just to get through the day. Please, do not let one child slip through. Please, ensure children receive education, medical attention, therapy, training. Please help support their needs, whatever they may be. And if you can't be honest, explain in a way the child understands, with care and compassion. The COVID outbreak has highlighted some great services who are very understanding of the mums involved and how vulnerable they are right now. Empathy is needed along with validation. We want others to understand that being separated is an enduring loss full of highs and lows, full of despair, rejection, but also with joy and love. We hope readers of the book will have more understanding of what we are trying to say and do with the book on isolation. Please don't forget about us mums.
We grieve for the loss, even more so during this lockdown. During this isolation of not being able to spend precious time with our children, who, when we're conceived, were very much a dream, a fairy tale of being a good mum to them. With learning, education and knowledge, we can change what has happened and make new ways better. Those involved have the power to change, not to let history repeat of self-harm, addiction, depression, self-loathing, low self-esteem. Each child deserves to grow without fear, without feeling abandoned or rejected, and without blame and shame. Look at the pictures in our book and see what is being felt. Read the words and digest their power. Be the person who cares enough to change a child's future. A family network, a family in crisis, or a family in love.
Yeah, so thank you everyone for listening to about our project. And I'm going to hand over now to Lisa Morris and invite her to tell you a little bit about the project that we're going to work on over the next few months. And we'll be speaking to Lynn shortly. Thank you.
Thanks, Siobhan, and thanks for sharing that amazing book that I absolutely love. My name's Lisa Morris. I'm a lecturer at the University of Lancaster, alongside work with Karen Broadhurst that Angela mentioned earlier. So I'm absolutely delighted that we've received funding from the ESRC, which is a name of a funding body, to work on a project about letterbox contact, and we've called it Threads of Connection. And you'll have seen the amazing work that the Common Threads Collective has done on this project. And I'm so excited that I'm going to be working with them on this new project about letterbox. We've heard from Badge very powerfully and from Louise very powerfully about the importance of letterbox contact to birth mothers, and also the importance of the physical letters and how that is so much meaningful, that you can keep hold of them and that your child has touched that letter comes across really powerfully. And this is something, sorry, my thing keeps rolling out, but this is something that we really want to get across in our project. So what we're going to do is we're going to be working, so I'm going to be working with Jenny, Siobhan, Louise and Lynn and the other members of the collective. And we're also going to be working with an artist performer called Lisa Lux. Some of you here might know her work. And what we're going to do, we're going to invite birth mums to contribute, to tell us about their experiences of letterbox contact. So we want to hear from people who are not, unfortunately, like Louise, no longer receiving letters. People like from Badge, who's got really positive experience of letterbox contact. We want to hear from you what would make a good letter to receive. Sounds like Badge is receiving these good letters, but if you're not, what would you hope to receive? Because what we want to know is, we want to show is how it's so important to birth mums to receive these letters. They're so important, but also to receive a letter that is meaningful, that's not just formulaic. And I know these are really difficult letters to write and receive, but this is something that we want to raise awareness through our project. Thank you. And Siobhan's going to share her slide again and tell us a bit. She's great with her slides. And you'll be able to see where you can find out more information if you would like to be part of the project when it launches. And we're also going to hear from Lynn. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa. Yeah, so we're going to just start by hearing a piece that Lynn recorded for us about her experience of letterbox, and we're going to have a little chat, aren't we, Lynn, shortly? Right, so screen share number 2.
My daughter was born in 2009 and went into foster care straight from hospital after a short stay in special care. I am an addict and was in the midst of addiction. She stayed with her foster carers until late 2010 when she was adopted. So that was it. Our final contact was at the police station. Saying goodbye that day broke my heart. My precious girl was gone. I received my first letterbox in 2011, which brought a lot of mixed emotions. Excitement to hear about my daughter, sad because I was missing so much, and even jealousy and anger that they had my precious baby and were bragging at me in my head, and it hurt. Every year I would be excited and anxious all at the same time. Letters were due around the time of my birthday. Not that they were on time. I got letters in 2012 and 2013, which were easier to receive. Then in the year of 2013, in my reply letter, I let the adopters know so my girl could be told when she was older that I was clean from heroin and off my methadone too. The year after, I didn't receive any letter. I was absolutely devastated and my head ran riot. What were they thinking? Had I done wrong to tell them something I was proud of myself for? 2015, I received a letter. Little did I know it would be my last one. Every year my heart breaks not knowing how my girl is doing. So in 2017-18, I had to do something for me and my other children. I had to be strong. I had had enough of not knowing when we would hear again. I put forward that I needed to know, one way or another, if the doctors were going to write, and if so, they needed to be consistent. The reply I got was, they didn't feel able to at present. There was an issue in the family, maybe in the future. So that was it. They had my daughter and didn't want to know about us, her first family. This broke my heart, but I had to carry on for everyone else and push my feelings aside like always. I just felt so lost and alone. Since then I seriously didn't know whether I was able to send my letters and had mixed emotions. What's the point when they're just going to be put in a file and my daughter won't see them unless she asked in the future to see her files? What had been said to her about us? We were no good addicts. It was torture. Then near the beginning of lockdown, I received news from a social worker who had seen my daughter. Because I have started to work with the local adoption agency to tell my story and help others, the social worker had been in touch with the adopters to let them know. I found out my daughter was fine but needed help and support at school, so the adopters were looking for specialised school to meet her needs. This gave me some peace of mind, some understanding and acceptance. My girl knew she was adopted and the adopters were doing a great job of bringing her up. I sort of understood why letterbox may have been stopped. The issue in the family must have been when it was recognised my daughter had problems. The adopters were dealing with this correctly, unlike when I found out about my son, who is 5 years older, having autism. I couldn't cope with it and hid all my feelings by taking drugs. At least my girl was getting people who could cope and deal with it. I still think it's unfair that I don't hear about my girl via the adopters, but hopefully in the future my daughter will question where she came from and want answers. I certainly hope one day she is inquisitive enough to see. Only time will tell, and it's all on her terms, no matter how hard it is. I owe her so many answers to so many things. I will live in hope that one day I will hear from my baby girl again. I wrote my letter last year in an attempt to see if it would be sent on, but it just got put on her file for future. And I am also now fully aware I won't hear anything about my girl unless she comes looking. But I will continue with my letters to go on her file and live in hope. As long as my girl is happy, healthy and loved, she has everything that she could need for now. I have to accept it's the way it is. I can't turn back time and change my situation. All I can do is learn from it and hope one day she will come find me.
Thank you, Lynn. Do you want to unmute yourself? Thank you, Lynn.
Welcome.
It's a powerful piece. We've worked together for a good while now, haven't we, Lynn?
Yeah.
And I think for me, this thing that you're doing about telling your story, I've just seen your story evolve just in terms of your ability to sort of reflect and learn and be brave, really, over many years. Thank you, Lynn, for that piece. And sharing your experiences of letterbox contact. I often come back to the line in the 2018 adoption inquiry. And so it says that there's rarely a clean break or severance in real life. Relationships endure in hearts and minds. The absence of physical presence may indeed mean that they are more powerful. And for me, this project that we're working on now, Lynn, is very much a hearts and minds project, isn't it? Yeah. So we only have a few minutes at this point, but you are going to join the panel at the end, which I'm really pleased about. So could I just ask you, Lynn, why you think this project, asking women to write the letters that they would like to receive from the adopters, why do you think this project's important?
Us mums need to have our voices heard. They're still our children, just because they're not with us. Doesn't mean we don't love them any of the less, because we do. And it hurts when we don't know what's happening.
Yeah. But why would you? Because so you touched on something there. You touched like on pain and hurt there, Lynn. And so this is writing these letters might be a difficult thing for women to do. Is there anything that you would? Why would you encourage somebody to write the letter if they feel that they can for our project?
Because there's always hope there. There's always hope. You've always got to look to the future and hope and trust. Trust that the future will hold better things for you.
Thank you, Lynn. And because we had a bit of a discussion, didn't we? Because what we realised, our project is we're going to invite people to write these letters kind of over Christmas, aren't we? Well, between now and kind of January time, and we're aware that Christmas is a really difficult time. And I was saying to you, do we need to delay this? But do you want to say a little bit why we decided to kind of have this running over Christmas, Lynn?
Personally, being a mum of an adopted child, I feel that you seem to think about your child around Christmas time. So it might be the true heartfelt feelings that you'd like the adopter to tell you around that time that you put in this letter. Because it's the letter that you'd like sent from the adopters.
Yeah.
What letter you'd like from the adopters. And you're more inclined to have your feelings. It might be too hard for people to do over Christmas, but it might also be that because they're in their heads already, it's an easier time to do it.
So that being maybe therapeutic, and we did decide, didn't we, to make sure that it went over, way into January as well. So it's not just around Christmas; it's a bit of making that time quite wide, aren't we?
Mm-hmm.
And how do you feel about writing the letter that you'd like to receive, Lynn? Because you haven't done yours yet, because we haven't started that stage of the project. How do you feel about that?
I felt excited originally, but to be honest, right now I've no idea what I'm going to put in it.
You're going into it with a bit of
a good try. And I'm looking forward to doing so as well.
Yeah, it will be. I'm looking forward to working on this project with you, Lynn, and with the rest of the collective. So, what I'm going to just put up now is just a slide. A really simple slide, no audio, nothing complicated for me to try and work out, hopefully. And what we're asking people to do is, if you would like to be part of this project, I mean, this is a really early launch of our project. We're right at the beginning, but if you're interested in knowing more or sending us a letter, we're going to be ready to post out some packs that we're going to work on over the next few weeks. So if you'd like to know more or to write a letter, please contact us, either myself or Lisa as the main contact. and we'll then tell you, we'll tell you about a PAC, which will be really, really clear about how you can get involved. If you've got any questions as well, please ask them. Thank you very much to everyone for listening to us today, and I just look forward to the rest of the event. Thank you, Lynn and Lisa.
Thank you.
Thank you, Siobhan, Lisa, and a special thanks to Lynn. A very powerful recording, and thank you for sticking around and answering some questions at the end. I think what I took from that was really shows the importance of keeping that contact link open and the importance of revisiting that. You know, if that social worker hadn't taken that effort to contact the adopters, then Lynn, I think you'd still be sitting waiting for information. And whilst you didn't get letterbox, I think sometimes just getting that information is enough to help you, isn't it, to sort of think, well, there's a reason behind this and I can understand.
That snippet put my mind at rest.
It's so important. As we're running slightly over time, we're going to have just a couple of slight changes. What we're going to do now is we're going to open the chat earlier than we'd first planned, just so that people have a chance to put questions in for the panel later on. And then when we go into the break, we're going to reduce that slightly down to 10 minutes. But we didn't want to reduce it too much because we're aware that people are going to need that time for a bit of a breather. Especially so as I'm about to introduce Laura's video from Two Good Mums, and it's an exceptionally emotional video, and it really, really brings home the loss that's felt by birth family. And so just please bear that in mind before you start to listen. And if you do have any questions, put them into the chat for us. Now, we're hoping that technology is now on our side again and that this video is going to play. And Laura will also be joining us for the panel after the break. So if there's anything that occurs to you while you're watching the film to ask, then do please share. But as I said earlier on, do bear in mind that if there are a lot of questions, we are limited for time, so we may just have to ask what we think are the most popular ones coming through.
Once upon a time, I was sat at my bedroom window and I saw my very first shooting star, and I knew that you could wish on them. And I wished for a family, a baby. I was young, naive, silly, but I did. And that wish came true. Not long after, I gave birth to a 5 pound 7 ounce beautiful baby boy, and we called him CJ. He was literally everything that I could have ever asked for. I don't remember a time where I was ever as happy as I was with him. I remember when he was born and everyone had left the hospital because he was born in the early hours of the night or the morning. Felt like we were the only two people in the world. And I told him how much I loved him, how much I wanted him. I told him I would protect him for the rest of his life, and I'd be by his side. And I told him all the things that I wanted to do with him, all the things I wanted to show him and teach him. And then, in what kind of became a tradition, I sang very quietly. I sang "You Are My Sunshine" to him. There has never been a moment more perfect in my entire life. When we got home, he was such a placid baby. He was so smiley when he learnt to smile, and he was just a joy to be around. I'm not saying it was easy. Of course, there were times that were hard. Soon after he was born and we brought him home, I became a single mum. But it was worth it for him. I would have done that 10 times over for him. But there is so much more that I don't remember. And I wish I'd taken 1,000 more photos. I had 5 months with CJ. And then he was injured by someone. And to this day, I don't know 100% who did that. And I probably never will. But because I couldn't prove that I didn't do it, of course, he was taken off me. He was put into foster care by social services, and I had contact once every day throughout the week. There is absolutely no way to describe what that did to me and what it did to my family. Having a child removed from your care doesn't just affect you, it affects those who are close to you, who are around you. And for me, that was my mum and my sister. I became a shadow of the person that I was when he was taken into foster care. I couldn't eat, I couldn't sleep. I became sick, I had no energy, I couldn't think straight, my mental health declined rapidly. I had absolutely no support, and that's not to say that I didn't have emotional support from my family, but they were falling apart too. This whole thing was really new to us all, and we were struggling to fall into place and get on with everything that was needed of us. When we were around CJ in the contact, we struggled not to cry, not to be overwhelmed at just how heartbreaking it all was. It was hard to just put that to the side and enjoy spending time with him. It bled into every facet of being with him and thinking about him. There was no pleasure in that anymore. Assessments came and went, and I failed. And I had to say goodbye. And that goodbye was the hardest thing that I have ever done. I had my entire family with me, so a lot of the day was theirs. And then I got a little bit of time at the end with him on my own, other than the social worker stood by the door. And I got to say goodbye to him. And I got to sing to him one last time. And then I had to say goodbye. Unfortunately, I quickly became pregnant again. I didn't realise at the time that I didn't want another baby. I wanted the baby that I already had. I wanted CJ, so I went into it with the wrong intentions. And sadly, my relationship became abusive and my world just completely fell apart. I was hiding the grief that I was still feeling for CJ. I was hiding the abuse that I was facing at home, just to try and get through to see if I could keep my second son. We had another assessment, and during that assessment I realised it just wouldn't be right for him to come home to the abuse. It wouldn't be right for him to come home when I hadn't fully bonded with him, and because I didn't have him for the right reasons, and so it felt right to say goodbye to him, and so I gave up fighting. After I said goodbye to CJ, I was given the opportunity to meet the adoptive family, and they were amazing. I couldn't have wished for two better people to adopt CJ. So when I found out that RJ was being adopted officially, I asked if the family that adopted CJ wanted to adopt RJ, and they did. And so RJ went to live with his brother the way that he would have if they'd been with me. And then the adoptive family gave me something that I had never expected. We met up again, and this time my mum and my sister were able to meet them, which was really important because they needed some form of closure too in all of this, to be able to live their lives and just not worry about the boys as much. And I knew I came out of the first meeting with the adoptive family feeling like I would never worry about the boys again, and I wanted them to have that. And in that meeting, the adoptive family actually gave me an email address. It took a couple of months for me to plug up the courage and to realise that it was the right thing to do to email them. And so I did. And when they responded, it was the beginning of a completely new and unique contact that is apparently quite rare. We originally focused on the boys. We talked about them, if they'd done anything during the day that was special, if they'd had anything going on in their lives, if they'd been on holiday, what they'd been up to. We were able to pass back and forth birthday messages and Christmas messages, and because the boys were able to sort of get to know me like that on top of the letterbox system, my eldest actually asked to see me in 2011. We waited a year and he was still asking, so we set that up. And I was absolutely petrified. And it sounds strange to say that you're petrified to see your own children, but I was. Thanks to Peggy coming to meet me, we'd ironed out all the details. I knew that CJ was excited to see me, and RJ, who was still quite young at that point, was a little reluctant, but was going to be there. Peggy came to pick me up at the train station, and they'd rented out a house in the local village. And I remember as she drove up the driveway, I could see CJ on the wall bouncing up and down, and I could just about make out RJ behind his dad. He was very shy. The meeting, albeit nerve-wracking, was incredible. It gave me the ability to see that the boys were so happy and so loved in their little family unit with Peggy and Chris, who were the adopters, and I honestly couldn't thank them enough for giving me that, because seeing them as a family unit was so eye-opening. It was so eye-opening, and it made me feel like, even though I regretted how this happened, it seemed right. It seemed like the boys had landed exactly where they should have done, with the parents that they were meant to have. And that gave me a lot of closure that I didn't even know that I needed. And I will be forever grateful that we got that. The meeting went so well that the boys and all of us have agreed that we would all like to continue it. For the last 8-9 years, we have been meeting annually, and bar COVID, we've still managed to get some meetings in there, and it's going really well. The boys know me. They know a lot about me. They know my family. My family have been able to attend these meetups now, and it's genuinely an extended family between us. You know, we all get together, we have a day together now as the boys are older, and it's just normal for us. we just hang out like a normal family. And I'm there if the boys ever need me. If they have any questions, they can ask Peggy and I'll answer them straight away. They've never had questions that couldn't be answered because I've been there the entire time. This contact has allowed them to grow up knowing that their birth family are just within reach. They can see us, they can talk to us, they can send us an email, and for them, I hope that is what was needed. So me and Peggy, the adoptive mum, have come together through all of this, and we really genuinely have created a friendship. She is genuinely my friend, and I am hers. It's not just about the boys, even though they are our priority, and we wanted to do more within this sector. And so we shared our story. We created a 10-episode podcast that shares both of our journeys from beginning to the present, and it talks more in detail about each step and how we became friends and how we got from just being adopter and birth parent to releasing a podcast together and direct contact and everything in between. Our situation is so rare, but we're not the only ones. There are a few people out there who are doing something like our contact, but there's not nearly enough. But it's worked for us. And my family and me have been healed from everything that happened from losing the boys. Because while we might have lost them, they never lost us. And that's the most important thing.
Thank you, Laura, for sharing your story. It's remarkable. I'm very emotional. I've watched that several times now, and it's still really hard to listen to. But also, there's a lot of hope there as well. And I'm absolutely thrilled that Laura will be joining us later on for the panel. I'm conscious that if anybody needs the advice line number following that, people are here to listen to you. And I encourage you to contact us if you feel that would be appropriate. People are here to listen. We're going to take a short break, and after the break we'll be hearing about the First Family team in the Northwest. We will be watching a video of our Wigan birth parents around support groups and peer group support. And we'll also have a recording from a birth father about his experience of adoption. What we will do is we'll leave the chat function on so we can have questions for the panel, and we'll get those together. And the panel will be later on at the end of the session. I am conscious that we have run over, so we're going to allow for about 10 minutes. Does that sound okay, Angela?
Yeah, no, that brings us back at dead on 1 o'clock. So I think that's quite easy for people to remember. But just before we go, can I just say a massive thank you to Laura for that? You know, and that quote at the very end, I think, is going to stay with me for a long time, where I lost my boys, but they never lost me. And I think that a huge thank you. That was such a brave thing to share. But yes, I think we all go and take a well-needed break, have a little bit of a breather, reach out for help if you need it, post questions in the chat, and we'll see you all back here at 1 for the second session. Thanks, everyone.
Welcome back, everybody. Just conscious of the chat. There's lots of questions coming through, which is great. Next, we're going to talk a little bit about the First Family Service within the Northwest, and also in Birmingham. We will then watch a specially commissioned film, which will look at peer support, and then we will hear a little bit more from our worker in the Northwest, Lauren, about some of the work that she's been doing with birth parents. So Polly, I'm wondering if Polly could be unmuted.
Hi.
Are you here?
Yeah.
Polly, do you want to introduce yourself a little bit? Is that okay?
Yeah, it's fine. So I'm a birth parent counsellor working in Birmingham. Worked on the other side of adoption for many years. Have joined PAC, and it's been really it's just really brought home that message that story of a child and a family's life doesn't just stop with a placement being made. So it's been a real kind of honour and privilege actually to work with birth family and birth parents in Birmingham. Yeah, so that's my role at the moment.
What's some of the work that you've kind of been undertaking at the moment?
Yeah, so it's quite varied really, depending on the needs of each person. Each person will go for those that are ready for it. So therapeutic counselling, so looking at the loss that they've faced, kind of forgiveness work, because there may well be things that they've been a part of that. So looking at kind of what to reflect on and take away, but also not letting that become like toxic shame where they're taking it in and there's something wrong with me as a person, because that's not true. And just a chance for people to tell their story and to be heard and to know how important that is, and that it's not just like a tick box. Also supporting with things like letterbox, and I know we've heard people talk about their different experiences of that. So sometimes that's established, and other times it's not, and other times it's broken down. And also just liaising with social workers, depending on where the journey is at in the adoption process, will very much affect how I work with somebody, depending on where that's at.
I wonder if there's any kind of common themes that you're sort of coming across in your work at the moment.
Yeah, and it's already been touched on by a lot of the birth parents already, but the idea of loss around a living person, and at times it's been around validating that is still a feeling of a loss, because sometimes with social stigma from society, it's almost like there can be this idea that birth parents aren't grieving in that same way, which they very much are. And I guess feelings of isolation, some of which will come from an internal place of, what is it that I've done? Am I not good enough? All of that kind of stuff, which will make connections really difficult to other people in terms of, will I be accepted? But also, like I just touched on, that social stigma. I remember leaving my old job, telling somebody there, it was another professional, that I was going to be moving on, and they said, "Oh, what are you doing?" And I said, "Oh, I'm going to work with parents that have lost their children." And then she just went, "Oh," really, really supportively. And then I ended it with to adoption, and her face just changed, and I really felt that, and I really noticed that judgment, and that thing just suddenly flipped, and I just thought, if I feel that, what must birth parents be feeling? And also, I guess, just fear and uncertainty, of, especially with COVID, all where letterbox has been disrupted. So where is my child? Are they okay? Are they well? All that kind of stuff. So yeah, those are some of the themes that have come up, really.
I wonder, kind of anecdotally, if there's been anything that you've experienced or any information that's shared that you think might be helpful for people listening within the sector, or perhaps those who are the prospective adopters, maybe. I don't know.
Yeah, I think the idea of honouring and valuing the birth family's place in that child's life. I went on some really interesting training recently that talked about adopters joining that birth family and to kind of carry on the next steps and to work alongside each other, rather than it being actually viewed in a negative way that a child's not with their birth family anymore. Because the birth family are that child's identity. It's where that child started out. It's, and they will want to know. And there was a really lovely example recently of some adopters that really kind of took on board that kind of spirit, and just in the way that they were asking the questions for their first meeting with birth family, they were really interested in the two girls that they had adopted, their strengths that they were noticing, so they were really musical, and they were asking really kind of appropriate questions just about where did that come from. And then, someone I was working with was going, oh, well, I always had the radio on when I was pregnant. And so they really felt valued and really felt seen, and that helped me in my work, because that feeling of shame, judgment, stigma is so strong, and those adopters really kind of helped to kind of see the birth parents as people to be valued, with a story to tell. So that really helped my work, but it really helped them, and how they felt about the adoption process as a whole.
Thank you, Polly. And what we'll do is we'll make sure that information about the service in Birmingham, the First Family Servicing in Birmingham, is available, and our leaflet and things. So if parents want to refer themselves into, they can, or professionals can as well. So thank you, Polly. That's really appreciate it. So next we're going to watch a film. It's around 15 minutes long. It does come with a warning, in the sense that it does discuss personal experience, and it kind of covers issues around domestic abuse, sexual abuse, and I think it's just a warning for making sure you look after yourself, making sure that you've got the number there for the advice line if you need it, and remembering that people are here to support. It is a difficult watch, but it's a much needed film. So I'll try and share this again, see how I get on.
I knew it looked like when we were born, but I don't know what it looks like now. So I can imagine it, but it's just not enough.
They say, most important, they always say, get through one day at a time. And that's what I do.
To know that my baby's out there and I can't touch him, it hurts.
I think no matter how many times you hear someone's story, no matter how many times you can relate to somebody else, it's never going to sink in that your kids are not there no more.
Children are born into birth families, and those families, their first families, will be in their lives forever.
I think historically birth parent voices have always been underrepresented. It's about making those voices heard a little bit more in positive ways, and understanding that actually birth family with lived experience of going through the adoption process actually have quite a lot to contribute.
Birth parents have their own experiences of life and the world that kind of brings them to a situation where there is, the devastation of them losing their children to adoption.
When my son was 8 weeks old, my partner had lost complete interest in him. I'd asked him one night, please give him his bottle. And it was very quiet upstairs, and when I went upstairs, my son was unconscious on his knee. I tried to get help, but I couldn't see anyone in the gardens or out, so I grabbed my son, took him downstairs, and my ex was like, slammed the door shut on me before I could get through it and said, don't you dare go and tell anyone. I should have phoned an ambulance, but I didn't. My ex would come down screaming, going, you're not phoning an ambulance, don't go get help. And I didn't get help till the next day when I went to work. And the social just said it was a bad move and took my son off me.
So I found out I was pregnant when I was 21, and I was excited, as all people are. I was scared at the same time. I gave birth. Unfortunately, social services came in and they took it from me from birth, and ever since then I've not been the same person. It was taken away due to my mental health, unable to keep myself or my flat clean because of that, and I just think it was just general being abused by the partner as well at the time. He was a couple of days old when he was removed from my care. I did have contact up until he was about 6 months old, and I haven't seen my son since he was 6 months old. He'll be 3 in a few months now. I still miss my child every day.
My first son was born in 2011 and I had him for 2 weeks. I had a breakdown in one of the meetings that we had. So they were telling me that I'm crazy, I'm not mature enough to look after a child. I was 19 at the time. They didn't give me time with him or anything like that. I haven't changed since I was 19 because I'm stuck in that position I was when my eldest was taken away from me. I did feel alone because I was very isolated. I've been isolated for the last 5-6 years. I've not really had friends, not really spoke to anybody.
They came for my kids initially after I come out of a domestic violent relationship. But after the proceedings, they decided, you need to go into therapy. Started the therapy, and then they stopped the childcare for my youngest child, who obviously can't bring a baby to therapy, which meant I was halfway through discussing the childhood rape I'd suffered at the age of 5 till I was 7. And when you're discussing that and you can no longer carry on that therapy, I went into a breakdown. I was a shell. I wasn't emotionally stable for my kids. That did not mean they needed to be taken forever. That meant I needed to sort myself back out. I needed to complete the therapy and get myself right for my kids. The day they took my kids, before the social worker managed to get my oldest daughter out of the house, she said to her, "Oh, I promise it's only going to be a few months, then you'll be coming home." That never happened.
A lot of our clients, even before the trauma of losing their children, have got a lot of trauma in their own childhoods. A lot of them have experienced really terrible childhoods and have been looked after children themselves and have gone through the system and maybe not felt supported. And as a result of that, their outcomes have been quite poor, in terms of their mental health, how they cope with their emotions.
I think the trauma that birth family experience in their own lives and the trauma of losing their child and going through proceedings and not having that grief and loss recognised is really difficult.
I just felt like a surrogate mum. I just carried a child for 9 months to just, after 8 weeks, to give him away.
I think if I wasn't distracting my mind, I'd probably be in a nut house. Because I walk down the street and see little blonde-haired toddlers and think, is that my kid? That's not good for any parents to be thinking that.
Most people have this rosy view of adoption, and for the adopters, it probably is. But for the parents, it's your whole soul has been ripped out of your body. You no longer have that. It's not yours no more.
I think it's for them finding a way to cope with their loss within a society that doesn't really recognise, accept or support loss through adoption. I think it's not really recognised.
I try and pretend my son's imaginary until I get the letterbox, because it's just too painful to, bring up all those old memories.
I think most people think we're bad people, but we're not. We're just people who've been through a lot of stuff.
Obviously, a lot of people, they see birth parents as, oh, your kid's been adopted, they've gone, you're a bad person. One girl at work, she said, oh, yeah, all birth parents who've lost their kids, they either batter him, they've done drugs, they've done alcohol, they're really, really bad people who deserve to have their kids took off him. And I said to her, well, why? Why is that? And she went, well, I know your situation, you've had a kid took off you, and I'm going to tell everyone that you're a bad mum, you're a horrible person, and you don't deserve to get your child back. And yeah, it made me not talk to anyone. I didn't want to talk to anyone at work because I had this people looking at me weird, and I thought, oh my God, they're going to think I'm a really bad person.
I've had my neighbours shouting through my window, well, I've still got my kids. You ain't got your kids, you're not worth nothing. And it's like, great, thanks for that, mate. I needed that.
There is a misunderstanding about birth parents. There's a sense in society that, children who are removed all come from bad people. Birth parents are all bad and they all fit in the same category. And of course, that's absolutely not true.
There's a very negative narrative around birth families and birth parents, and that isolation can just really compound some of those mental health difficulties, addiction, and it kind of triggers a lot of trauma that they've already experienced.
My family need, they don't have a clue about what I'm going through. They don't know how to talk to me.
A lot of my clients say to me they don't feel like they can speak to family, or they don't feel like they can speak to friends because they don't actually understand, or a lot of them actually stop talking about the child and then they don't feel like they can go to them.
Like, there's a baby shower coming up next month. My niece is like, do you want to come? You don't have to, you can stay at home. Mum's like, if you go, I'll support you, don't worry. And I'm like, I want to go. I'm not being singled out because of that.
It's just so important for them not to feel alone, and that there are other people out there, and I think it does help to give them hope and motivation to keep going and to feel like they can carry on their life and they can do things that are positive and they can make their children proud.
There was a time when I would not have done group work, period. You wouldn't have got me in a room with other people to do group work. But now it helps. It helps to know that other people are going through what you're going through, and to know you're not on your own.
Peer group support for birth parents is absolutely crucial for birth parents not to feel that they're on their own.
I think peer support just brings an element of people know what you've been through. You get parents walking into a group and just automatically feeling a sense of people get how I'm feeling and people really understand this, and it's a space that's really safe for them to talk openly and honestly about that loss.
I remember sitting on train and thinking, oh my God, what they're going to talk about. Are people going to judge me? But, you know, I don't want to meet, I don't like meeting new people, I've got anxiety.
To have someone understand and not judge me for what happened in the past was different. Very different. I was nervous about talking about him because I don't want to come out like I'm proud or anything like that, because I can't be. I've not touched him since he was 3-4 days old, so how can I be proud of a child I don't know? How can I love a child I don't know? How can I be grieving for a child I don't know? So coming to terms with that and facing people in a group and talking about it is hard, but it's also really nice to meet people that understand, they get it and they're not judging me, you know?
Should we move on to some art making? Yeah. So if anybody at any moment needs to just take a step out, you know, the art making I think can really stir up quite a lot of feelings.
Today we've had an art therapist come and lead the session. It was an opportunity for birth family to produce an art piece that was meaningful to them. A lot of the pieces were around the loss that the families have experienced, the journey they've been through, and an opportunity to be able to express their grief and their loss in a creative way.
I kind of did mine so that this is what I look like on the outside. So I'm more colourful on one part, then I'm trying to mask into society, and on the inside it's more chaotic and crazy, because that's how I feel on the inside every time I think about them. So, to come to the session, meet these people, and I've actually found myself smiling a lot today because I don't smile very often.
I just want to know what my son looks like.
Yeah.
I want to see him grow up. Yeah. I just imagine it's not good enough, is it? I rang PAC-UK and then Lauren, the support worker, got in touch with me, and then I found out about the groups and I came to the first one. I loved it, so I kept going back. I thought I'd hide it away forever, and the only people that knew that story was me. I didn't think I'd be able to tell my story, and now I can, so without being judged as well.
My solicitor told me about PAC, so I've joined them, met other people in my situation. It's helped massively. My confidence has gone back up. I've learnt to move on while still remembering my son. I made like a little poster to put on my bedroom doorway, his name on, his date of birth, and stuff we enjoy doing. Because I've got to face the fact that he's not imaginary. I've got to face that he's real, but he's not with me.
I think sometimes when the families don't perhaps have the words to say, being able to express it in an art form is really important.
Birth parents need a lot of help and support because they do turn to alcohol, they do turn to drugs, they try and do bad things to themselves, and they just need support.
It is only in hearing birth parents' voices that we will really make some changes to adoption. It's about recognising that's a really different voice, but it's a really different voice that needs to influence all the other aspects of the decision making around adoption.
I think a lot of what my clients say to me is, I know my child's been adopted now, but I wish it would have been done in a different way. So I think it's about listening to their voices and seeing how we can implement that into future practice, because adoption is a lifelong and a life-changing event.
For that person who's adopting the child, it's nothing but happiness and love and this overwhelming, oh my God, I finally got this child, where the birth parents kind of left behind that wall and they're crumbling and they're not being looked at or seen in any capacity.
Because I think with support I'd have been a good mum, I genuinely do. So I think we need more support around our mental health and around what we're doing wrong rather than being told that we are wrong.
I genuinely feel there are a number of birth parents that come to the attention of social care where if we had the right resources, we wouldn't be making adoption orders, we would be looking at the rehabilitation or the support of those birth families to stay together.
They give adoptive parents this training that's so vital for them to be adopters. Well, why can't they give that to us? Because they're just training them to become parents, aren't they?
So for me, a letterbox is very, very important, because if I didn't have that, I'd know nothing about the baby. I would like more. I don't think once a year is enough. Another thing I'd like them to do is give me some pictures, because I don't know what my child looks like.
Letterbox and contact arrangements in adoption for birth parents, in a nutshell, it's not fit for purpose.
It's also as well about the parents having the support to write those letters. Those letters can be really difficult to write and difficult to receive.
At the end of the day, I'm his mum, and I'm always going to be his mum. No one can take that away from me, and it just feels like I've not been given the chance to be a parent. Somebody else is doing my job.
For the future, I just want to be a mum. That's it. I don't want anything else, I just want to be a mum.
I remember one of the judges saying to me, she needs to go home and grieve. You can't grieve for a child that's alive. How can you grieve for a child that you know is living and walking?
Thank you to our parents again. That was fantastic, and we really appreciate all the time that the parents have put in for that film. What we're going to do now is we're going to have Lauren, who works for First Family Service, discuss a little bit about some of the work that she's been doing with birth family, sort of following on a little bit from the film. So is Lauren here? There you are.
Yeah.
Yeah, 1 second. I do have something to share on screen, so let's see if I can do it. Just while I'm loading this, Lauren, do you want to talk a little bit perhaps about your role at the moment within the First Family Service?
Yeah, so I'm a first family practitioner. I work with birth parents and relatives that live in the Northwest. So I work with mums, dads, grandparents, aunties, uncles, siblings, anybody really that's been affected by adoption.
Can you talk us through some of the creative pieces that you've been undertaking with families at the moment, particularly our support groups and things, and why this is so important?
Yeah, of course. So I do a lot of creative work with my clients, both in the one-to-one sessions and in our monthly support groups. I think creative work is a great way for our clients to connect with their emotions and to be able to express themselves without having to find the words, which can sometimes be too difficult for them. Doing creative work gives our clients something physical to take home with them as well after either their session or the group. And a lot of them say to me that helps them to feel more connected to the child or relative. And it's also a physical reminder that they're not on their own and that there are people out there who do care about them and what they're going through. A lot of my clients put the things that they've made on like the bedside tables or the windowsills, and they find that this also gives them some comfort. I've also got some clients who go a step further, and they have a dedicated shelf for everything that they've made. And this gives them something to feel proud of and something that they feel that they can keep adding to over the years. Creative work is also really important because it gives birth parents and relatives a tool to cope with their feelings of loss and grief. And I can give a couple of examples if you want, or are you putting the slides on? Do you want me to carry on, Emma?
Great, thank you.
Yeah, so you'll see in a minute, because there's some pictures of some of these things on the slides that Emma's going to load. So I've supported a lot of my clients to create memory boxes for their children or relatives, which they all use in very different ways because their loss and their grief is unique to them. A lot of them use them to store special items, so things that they've kept belonging to their children or their relatives that are really meaningful to them. A lot of them look through the memory boxes on really difficult days as a way to cope with how they're feeling that day. Some use them to document things that they've been doing and things that they'd like to share with their child or relative in the future. Some keep letterbox letters in the memory boxes, and they also store birthday cards and Christmas cards for them, especially if that's not part of the letterbox arrangements. They use the memory box as a tool to feel that they can do that. And also it's a way of also again feeling like they are still doing something for the child or relative that will contribute to their future, and they hope to be able to show them in the future. You'll also see on the slides, once we've got it up, that I also make a lot of like message and wish jars with my clients for the children or relatives. So those jars contain messages and wishes, so things that they'd want to say to their child or relative, and wishes for their future and their hopes for their life. Again, this helps a lot of my clients to feel like they are doing something for their child or relative, which again contributes to their future and is something that they really hope to be able to show them one day. There's so many examples of creative work. We could go on forever, but other examples include decorating plant pots and planting a flower in that plant pot as a thing to nurture and watch grow. So that can be like a physical reminder of their child and visualizing them growing through life. We also create a lot of button trees that represent their hopes and wishes for the future, both for themselves and for their child or relative. And we do like specific activities, like around Christmas time in our support group last year, even though it was on Zoom because of the lockdown. We made Christmas baubles, and a lot of people put things inside those baubles. So I remember somebody put like their child's dummy inside the bauble, you know, and other people put other like special small items inside of those. I have got some words from one of my clients who is on the event today about the creative work that we've done together and how this has helped her. So I'll just read that out if that's okay. So Amy has said, I've been working with Lauren for nearly 2 years now. It's been a very bumpy roller coaster as I've lost 3 children and it's hurt me real bad. I've been through bad breakdowns, which has led me to self-harm, and it was a very bad time for me. In them spaces of time, me and Lauren have spent a lot of time doing creative work together. We've done a few canvases, family trees, vases, memory jars and memory boxes. I've also done jars which have messages in for my babies. I've got a memory shelf for my babies and a memory wall, which I think has helped me. Me and Lauren have a strong connection. She has helped me to feel safe and myself again. She's also made me feel more confident and even got me to eat when I've been at my worst. I feel better in myself, but I still need reassurance at times. Lauren has helped me so much to get my voice back out there. I've tried so hard and I won't give up. I'll keep trying.
Thank you. I'm going to just show as well just some of the work that our parents have been doing over the time within the groups and things. And whilst we're looking at that, I wonder if you could maybe talk to us about the work you do to support parents to meet adoptive parents and sort of some common themes that you've experienced, I guess.
course. So I've nearly worked for the First Family Service for 2 years now, and it is great for me to be able to say that in my experience, the majority of my clients have been offered a meeting with their child's prospective adopters by the local authority, which is really positive. There's lots of ways that I support them with these meetings, so I've kind of done it in a little bit of an order. So I will kind of take responsibility for communicating with the child social worker to arrange the meeting. So thinking about the logistics of that meeting, the when, where, and how it should take place. I help my clients to think about the pros and cons of meeting the child's prospective adopters, especially if this is something that they're unsure about doing, because if it's a birth parent and it's the first time that they're having their child go through adoption, it's an unknown experience. So a lot of them naturally have a lot of anxieties around meeting prospective adopters. I also help them to work through any feelings that they might have around this meeting, so including any anxieties that they might have or anything that they feel nervous about. It's mainly about putting their mind at ease and them knowing that I will be there for them every step of the way. I also help them to know what to expect, so just down to little things like who's going to be there, what's going to happen, what's the running order of things, and agreeing things in advance so that nothing is a surprise for anyone, down to things like something that happens very often in these meetings is the child social worker will take a photo of the birth parent and the prospective adopters together. And if that's not been discussed in advance, that can be something that can really throw people off. So I make sure that my clients know that if that is something that's going to be done and how they feel about it. I support my clients to put together the questions that they want to ask their child's prospective adopters during the meeting, and I'll then send these to the child social worker to share them with the prospective adopters so that the prospective adopters know what's going to be asked and they can decide whether they feel comfortable with that, and also prepare their answers. I also support them to put together anything that they'd like to take to the meeting with them. This could be something for their child that they want their child to have, or sometimes it could be something for the prospective adopters. I have had some of my clients that have bought little gifts for the prospective adopters, and they've been really well received. Some of the things that some of my clients make for their children to take to the meeting is a memory box that they've made, a scrapbook of photographs, or a keepsake present that they'd like the prospective adopters to give to the child when they're older. I also get the prospective adopters' questions for my client from the child social worker. So that's so I can do the same thing, make sure that they know what's going to be asked, make sure they feel comfortable with it, and make sure that they know what to expect. I help them think about what they might want to say. So we draft their answers so that on the day, if they freeze or they feel quite overwhelmed and they want me to take over, I'm then in a position to do that. I'll also make sure that I provide emotional support before, during and after the meeting, and put in place a plan for after the meeting so that the client is supported. So whether that's thinking about, can they go to a family members, can they go to a friend's, is there something, self-care wise that they can do after that meeting to make sure they look after themselves. I also take notes from my clients during those meetings, because I've found that a lot of my clients will come out and they can't remember what's been said. They might have 20 questions to ask, and they can't remember what the prospective adopters have said to number one. So I will make notes as well and write them up for them so that they've got a record of that meeting forever. Do you want to go on to some of the common themes that I've experienced? Yeah. So I have found that the majority of birth parents are not angry with prospective adopters. Their anger tends to be directed at social services and the wider system in general. I would say that there's a lot at stake for birth parents if they do direct their anger at the prospective adopters. For example, this could lead to the prospective adopters, telling their child, negative things as they grow up about them. And they're already conscious that what might be in their child's records is already heavily negative. So they wouldn't want to do anything that would contribute further to that. And also the loss of post-adoption contact. If they're angry and aggressive towards prospective adopters, they know that their only connection to their child is going to be jeopardised. So I've never experienced any of my clients doing that in nearly 2 years. Another common theme is that birth parents really value the opportunity to meet their child's prospective adopters. Although these meetings can be really daunting and emotional for everybody, they're also hugely beneficial, including the child in the future, knowing that their birth parents and their adoptive parents met can be really, really important to them. I found that birth parents get a lot of reassurance from meeting their child's prospective adopters, just reassurance around who's going to be bringing them up, what kind of life they're going to have, reassurance that they are going to commit to post-adoption contact, and reassurance that their child will be supported to find them in the future if they want to. In terms of post-adoption contact, a lot of my clients have said to me that they find it a little bit easier to write to their child's prospective adopters if they've met them, rather than trying to write to faceless and nameless strangers. For my clients that unfortunately haven't met their child's prospective adopters, I found that this often exacerbates their feelings of loss and grief because they don't have any reassurance around who is caring for their child. And for me, that in itself is another loss for them to work through. And this can also make post-adoption contact more challenging for them. In circumstances where birth parents are not given the opportunity to meet their child's prospective adopters, I've often advocated for, whether we can have a video meeting if there's any concerns around aggression, or at the very least a paper exchange of questions and answers, so that the birth parents and the prospective adopters can ask each other the things that they would have done if they would have met face to face. But unfortunately, in my experience, this doesn't always happen. I found that these meetings work best when everybody's been prepared in advance, everybody is supported during the meeting by their own workers, and everybody feels heard, listened to, valued and respected. Unfortunately, I have experienced examples of when this hasn't happened for my clients, and it's been a very difficult experience for them, which is something that we then have to work through in our sessions together. I've also found that the venue of these meetings is really important because there's such a power imbalance between the birth parents and the prospective adopters, and therefore the venue of the meeting needs to be chosen really carefully. I found that birth parents would prefer to meet somewhere that's neutral and doesn't hold any emotional memories for them or any particular triggers. Unfortunately, I have experienced occasions where social workers have organised these meetings to take place in contact centres where the birth parents saw the child for the last time, which is not appropriate. I think that more sensitivity is sometimes needed around the planning and execution of these meetings.
Thank you for that. It's really important to hear about the work that you're doing, so thank you very much. Angela, I wonder if you may just have some reflection on that whilst I try and sort this next film out.
Yes, and thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think so many things jumped out at me, but I think what really stood out was the compassion when you're talking about the work that you're doing with the families, and your comment about how it's lifelong and life-changing, and how it's so vitally important to get that right, and putting that sensitivity back into it, and it's so that it's not sort of handled in quite a cold or distant manner, which I know for a lot of us that's how it's felt, especially that what you said there about making sure that the venue's suitable when you're meeting at future adopters. And I think it's also the same about that farewell time that you have with your children as well. That needs to be really carefully thought through about whether or not that venue in itself is appropriate, because these are lifelong memories, not just for birth family but for the children as well. And I think we really need to make sure that we're mindful of that, and that they may want some nice photographs to take with them, and not, as in my case was said goodbye in a conference room, which is not ideal. And especially struck by the comments around, not just in the video made by the parents, but what you've both said as well, is how many birth parents are victims themselves of trauma, and how we really need to be finding a way to work with these families and have a much more trauma-informed approach, rather than what we seem to be currently doing, which is sort of punishing them twice for being a victim of trauma and then not being able to parent because they're a victim of trauma. And if we could put that support in place early on, the difference that could make, even if the outcome doesn't change. I know I would have felt much better if I'd known I'd been given a fighting chance, and I'd been given help, and then if it still hadn't happened, then I might have been able to accept that a little bit more than not having been given any help or not having been given a chance. But thank you both for sharing some brilliant examples of work, and the creative side is so important to give people an outlet for such a complex grief that's not sort of black and white. How are we feeling about the film? Are we?
We're going to give it a go. We're going to see. I'm hopeful. Can't go much worse, can it? So, yeah. So, do you want to introduce?
Yes.
the
No.
next
Sorry.
slide?
Yeah. No. It's actually, the next slide's really, really important. The next video, sorry, is really important for us to hear, because it's a really unheard side of adoption, and it's going to be a birth father speaking about his experiences and his loss and the different dynamics that's brought to him. And I think that I said this earlier when Emma and I were chatting, you know, I've been trying to raise awareness of adoption for 13 years and sort of met quite a few birth families along the way, but this is actually the first time I've heard from a birth father, which I think speaks volumes in how birth fathers are seen and heard. So I'm aware that some of what he might be discussing could be difficult for some people to hear, but I think it's really important that he's given the opportunity to share his perspective. So fingers crossed.
Let me know if it doesn't play.
I will, don't worry. I'm sure Mike's on hand with the next question if not. So
Hello, my name is Lauren and I work for the First Family Service Northwest, and I'm joined today by Asro. We're going to be talking about Asro's experiences of being a birth dad and what he feels needs to change for birth dads who have lost children through adoption. Asro, I know that's not your real name, but we have chosen to use this name today to protect your identity and the identity of your children. I know you've already seen the questions that I'm going to be asking you today, but if you need a break at any point, then please let me know. Is that okay?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the first question is, can you tell us a little bit about your story?
Yeah, I'm a father of 5 children. I have 3 boys and 2 girls. I do have a history of domestic abuse. Because of parts of my history, I've had 4 of my children removed. My first child I accept I could not care for. My mental health had deteriorated. I abused drugs and alcohol. I was violent and aggressive towards those closest to me. Because of this, I was provided with heavy medication to help with my problems. As this was the situation, I then went on to surrender my other 2 children to the local authority. Years on from this, I have made changes. I made massive changes to my life. I no longer take drugs or drink excessively. I've done a number of courses and I've made great achievements. Within this process, I did fight for my 4th child, but I was prejudged and discriminated by certain members of the system. Unfortunately, this led to my little girl being forcibly adopted. That's adopted without consent of myself or my partner. She was only 2 at the time. My partner was pregnant whilst we were still appealing this. We made at least 12 appeals, using and spending thousands of pounds of our own money. I do now have my 5th child in my full care. That's the best I can answer that.
Thank you so much for telling us a little bit about your background and what's led you to be here today. And it's amazing to hear that your little boy, your 5th child, is in your care and doing well.
Thank you.
Okay, the second question is, what does it mean to you to be a birth dad? And do you think you've experienced things differently to your partner?
Yeah, there are many joys and many scares to being a birth dad. For me, it was an emotional time. And that's because of the constant thought of my child being removed. On top of this, trying to look after my partner, she was pregnant. Not only was she going through an emotional time, a lot of stress, and carrying our child for 9 months. So there's definitely a difference to our experiences. There are moments I did enjoy such as listening to baby's heartbeat, feeling him move in mummy's belly, buying clothes, preparing the room, just little things like that. But it's also a very hard time, because we did have the local authority coming in and doing assessments, this, that, and the other, and putting stress on mum. So that's for a mother to carry a baby while going through that stress, it's also impacting on the child too, and how my partner suffered really bad in the last labour. My son came early, and this is because of the stress that was impacted on her. So yeah, it is quite hard to get through this time. It should be a happy time, but instead it felt dead negative because of the constant stress of the LA.
It sounds like it was a very, very stressful time for you, Asra, with what you and your partner were both going through together.
Yeah, we've had both sides of it. We came out, this time it was worth it, but the other times it was, that's a downside to it. No one wants to carry a child for 9 months after removed. After, if you're going through an assessment, you're doing it for a reason. It's just really hard.
Yeah. And what does it mean to you now to be a birth dad to your 4 children that have been adopted?
It's a hard question. It's quite it's a heavy weight to carry, knowing that I'm still with my partner. I have one child in my care, and 4 my children are in the system, and it's quite a weight to bear. It's also very hard to think about. Sometimes I have, it's just one of the hardest things, it is. That's the only way I can describe it, like a weight on my shoulders. That's I want to be able to speak to them. There's lots of things that I'm missing out on, and there's lots of questions that I know that they will want to know, that I'd like to fill in them gaps that are missing. It feels empty.
Absolutely. That leads us on really to our next question, which is about what your experience of letterbox contact has been with your children that have been adopted, and how you think that could be better.
Yeah, I mean, my views are dead against the way the system can disconnect a family, leaving only one option of contact, which is letterbox. That's once a year, and that's not even a reliable source of contact. I've experienced chasing letters for years to then find out that they're not even sending letters. They're ignoring the very fact that they agreed to do this upon adopting our children. It's the most heartbreaking feeling after already having your child adopted by the system. Every year I have to challenge letterbox contact staff to do their jobs, get in touch with the families to remind them how important it is to keep the communication open. one family sends letters, the other family have chosen to ignore all points of communication. They ignore the letters we send, they don't answer the phone to the contact staff, and they don't reply to their emails. I think post-adoption contact could be improved whereby an agreement is set as a court order, so not only the mum and dad but also the children don't suffer from a negative impact this could and thus have on most families. I strongly believe our children will be happy to receive a birthday card and a Christmas card and even have pictures of their birth parents, even if it's against receiving pictures of your children. I don't see how this could have a negative impact on the children. I fully get the Data Protection Act, but I also believe it's very important that the nature of a case of adoption is looked at. For example, look at me with my daughter. She was adopted because, unfortunately, I couldn't care for her, but I've got my son in my care. So for options to be opened up about photos, meetings between those families, where being the birth parent, where being a parent's care is not possible, but also where there's a clear and positive relationship which is loving and caring towards their children. For these reasons, I do not see why options can't be considered when an adoption goes through.
Absolutely. So it sounds like what you're saying is that, you know, your wish is that letterbox would be made official in law rather than it being a voluntary agreement, and you'd like it to be consistent, you know, to arrive when it's meant to arrive, that you don't have to feel anxious about if it's coming or if it's not, and for it to be predictable for you and your partner, and now your son as well, so that he can hear about how his siblings are doing. And it's, it must be so difficult, the fact that you don't hear anything about your 3 oldest children, but you do your little girl. So it must be very, very, very tricky for you.
It's a constant worry. I've been through a situation where I'm looking around at every child thinking, is that mine? Is that my child? You don't even know what your child looks like, or they might constantly be. It's vice versa. When they start to grow, they'll start thinking about the same, and that's if they know at that age. And that's what most adoptions are about. They're supposed to bring them up knowing and making them feel that it's okay, rather than a last minute spur when they're in their adulthood, which will seriously impact on them.
Yeah,
And,
absolutely. So you think it would be better to have that better and stronger connection whilst they're younger, so that it's not such a shock and it's not such a big thing, and that it should just be more normalised that you are still part of their life and they have got their adoptive family as well, and to make the child feel more kind of comfortable and confident in kind of who they are as well.
I met with the birth parents of my first child who was removed from my care, and they agreed letterbox contact. I actually sat in a room with them, and they explained that they'll have a big family, and I didn't meet with my daughter's birth parents, but it's vice versa. The ones who sat in a room with me and agreed to do the letterbox contacts and everything else, they chose to shut down altogether. The ones I didn't meet with are making the effort to send letters, but I still have to chase them up and remind them.
Yeah, still not easy. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Asro. So the next question is, what advice would you give to professionals working with birth dads, and what support do you think birth dads need after their child has been adopted?
I think, for mums and dads, especially dads, because dads sort of have this role to play. They might feel that it's a very hard time. The advice I give to professionals working with dads are to try and get an understanding of each birth dad, what impact it's had on him, what he's experiencing or going through at that time. Puts different support in place for different individuals, as some dads might be angry at the system, whilst others might be upset and confused, and some dads might just shut down and ignore it all. I believe a different approach for each case is necessary. It should be more support in place for each individual in order for them to accept support, be more open and honest, down to earth, explaining the benefits, and you know, just being open about how some parts are wrong. It makes people feel better rather than thinking that you're just against. Do you know what I mean? When they're at rock bottom, I think you should always remind them how strong they are and continue to do this for them to be able to pull themselves up a bit.
Okay, absolutely, thank you. And then our last question was, can you tell us a little bit about how PAC-UK has helped you?
My experience with PAC has been really positive. I have good values from this, and it has had a really good impact on myself and my partner. We can talk about our children now. We can look at good memories rather than negative, and you know, we used to shut each other down a lot, but we learn new ways to talk about it. We can have laughs about good memories. We can look at pictures together, and we know what to do when it's an emotional time around the birthday. Round, you know, looking at photos and stuff, and how to deal with little events like these. We're able to talk about things a lot clearer too. I think it's one of the best things we did.
So can you tell people a little bit more about what work we did in our sessions? I think you've got some things with you, haven't you, that you'd like to show people?
Yeah. I mean, we did a lot in our sessions. Some of it we had. I mean, we had a lot of ranting at the beginning, but sometimes the best way is to let off steam before you start your work. And you know, you understood everything, didn't you? I mean, you've met all individuals with different backgrounds. Some of the work we did was, I mean, we had laughs, we cried, we moaned, but yeah,
all the emotions. Yeah.
I'm going to show you if I can flip the camera. So we did some work around spiral of emotions, and these are my colour shards, let's see. And for each feeling that I went through in the past, I have a bit of a dark past, so I ended up pulling out this dark shard. I think for each one, it's a little memory. It sort of symbolises where we've been, what we're going through, where we're going. Let me pull them out. These are pretty cool. These, and it's a good way to sort of, even though it's only little things, it's something rather than nothing. So I like that one. That one's a very cool one. I'd say that's me now. Glowing. No, but these are messages, bottles that we put together, and we was able to write really important messages and stuff that we'd like our children to know. So each one of these represents my 4 children that aren't with me, and you know, anything can happen, but they will receive these. And it's, you know, one of them might have the answers to the questions that they're thinking. So I think that's really important, and I'm really glad that I had the opportunity to do that, because I wouldn't have thought of it myself when I was going through that when I was at rock bottom. These are pens that we use to draw up a cloud of emotions that we was going through, and when we were doing that, we had a few laughs and stuff, and we had a few cries. Some of this is my partner's too, so it's very sensitive. She keeps all her stuff safe in here. This is a memory box, and she keeps stuff like trainers, my daughter's teddy, photos go in there, so it's all kept very safe. You know, it locks and everything. And PAC provided us with this stuff, which we're very grateful for. So we do have values now from it. You know, I'm gonna give this my son when he learns time. Hopefully soon.
So what do you use those memory boxes for now, Asro? When do you find them helpful?
I find them helpful when we come across something, photos, birthdays, Christmas. We're able to put things in them. We now gather Christmas and birthday cards. That we have them. You know, it's quite an emotional time knowing when your children's birthdays are, but they're not with you. And sometimes it helps to do these little things and put them in these boxes. Also, you might have stuff from your children that you've kept, and it means a lot to you. It might be your son's or daughter's favourite blanket or teddy or a pair of trainers, and it might be a party that's holding on to, and you're able to keep it safe. And it's about them memories. Some people don't want. I don't like to have my photos on show of my other children, because they're not here. So it's a constant reminder of that. So put them in this treasured memory box, because that is what, you know, that's how I like to look at it. When they come home, we can pull stuff out the memory box together. It means a lot to have this. It means that I'm keeping this stuff safe.
Yeah, and would you say it gives you hope for the future and something to work towards, really?
I think that's part of the work that we did, and I think that there's light at the end of the red tunnel. Yeah, like I said, I do have worries that, you know, I might not hear from them, but in another way, I always believe, you know, that things come together in the end. So I think it's massively important that we stay positive and we do these things. I'm going to have stuff to talk about with my children, and I'm going to have photos to pull out and say, this is when you was with, or when you was at hospital, and this is, you know, this is memories. And I want them to have these messages. You know, it's hard to say certain things, but it puts a lot into perspective, having done the work with yourselves.
Good. So thank you so much, Asro, for sharing your story with us today and your messages for change. It's been a real privilege to do this interview with you, and thank you for being brave enough to turn your camera on as well so that we could see you. I'm sure a lot of people are going to feel really inspired by what they've heard today from you, and I really hope that any other birth parents that are listening, you know, can feel less alone by what they've heard today, and some advice of how to manage their loss. Is there anything else you'd like to say?
Just to take the advice, because, you know, there's always a way up. Yeah, that's it, really. You know, you can only help yourself, others to help you. So accept that help. It is beneficial, massively.
Thank you.
All right, bye.
Wow, it's such a powerful film and so important that we heard it. And I'm so proud of him for feeling so brave at the end to finally be able to turn his camera on. And the thing about the memories boxes, that really stuck home, especially when you've got siblings that are at home and some that are adopted or some that are in foster care. It's that link. And for me, my memories boxes, sadly, I don't have very much in my memories boxes because I fled domestic abuse. I wasn't able to get very many of my children's belongings at all, so which kind of makes what I do have more precious. But it meant that I was able to show my little girl, when she was old enough, she wanted to look at pictures and she wanted to see what was in those boxes. And so they are a link, and it's important that they have that link. And sort of thank you to PAC for helping them to pull those things together, because I know it can be really difficult when you're sort of trying to look at those things and work out what to put in those boxes. Now we're going to go across and invite our panel members to join us. Apologies to everyone. We're aware that we're running over time just a little bit, but we're going to try and keep the panel down to about 15 minutes so that we can hopefully make an aim to end for about 2:30. Apologies if anyone does have to leave us, but if not, we'd really love it if you could stay with us until the end. Now, Mike, are you in charge of the questions?
I certainly am in charge of the questions. Have we got everybody here? I was expecting Laura among others. Oh, here she is. Excellent.
There she is. Hi, Laura.
Anybody else still to join? Brilliant. No, we've got some fantastic questions, and not surprisingly, they're on the themes that we've been exploring today. Questions about contact and meeting adopters, and a bit about intermediary as well. So with no further ado, the first question was, as social media is making the world smaller, should we be rethinking how we do letterbox contact? And I'm going to throw that out. Have we got any offers from our panel on that question? Should we be rethinking the way that we do letterbox?
Who's feeling brave? I know that I've been doing some work recently with the Nuffield Foundation around looking at the possibility of making it easier, with maybe the invention of something like an app, so that we know that whatever form this contact takes, it's been received, it's been passed on, it's been read, so that it takes away some of that worry about waiting and wondering about what's happening. But I suppose Laura may have more on that because she has slightly different contact to the rest of us, so it's probably best placed to speak about that.
What do you think, Laura? Did you have letterbox before your meetings? You did, didn't you?
Yeah, and it actually still continued even when the direct contact started. I know that there is at the moment the letterbox campaign is going on to write to your MP to get them to do something about it. So there's that in progress. There are people trying to change this because letterbox just isn't enough for people. You don't get a genuine connection through it. It's difficult to. It depends on who comes first, because if your letter comes first, then you reply to it, and then you have to wait a whole year for what happens next, and then that conversation just drops off. It doesn't continue. You just sort of drops off, and you get a different letter the next year that says something completely different, and it's just so hard to get any kind of relationship from one letter back and forth, and that's it, a year. Some people do have more. But it's just not enough. It's not fit for purpose.
And I'm guessing that most of you birth mums on the panel here, under normal circumstances, you wouldn't write letters. I personally don't really write letters anymore. So it sort of feels maybe that should move into the 21st century sometime. Lynn or Badge, have either of you got a thought about that? Just put your mic on, Lynn, and speak away.
I think that they should keep in contact with us more. I ain't heard about my daughter since 2015, I think it was. And she's 13 next year. What about her brothers and sister? She's got a brother that's got severe autism.
And what's it like for you? What's it like for you, Lynn, hearing nothing about them?
It's torture, because I know how much it tortures my other children as well. They were in foster care, but now they've slowly come home, except for the one with disabilities, because of my medical problems, I can't have him home now. I mean, I can't do it. I can't look after him, so I had to hold my hands up and say I can't do it. But I still want to know about my little girl, and I'm still very much involved in my little boy's life and all my other.
One of our questions is about the exchange of photographs and being able to see photographs of your children, and obviously that's been a very frustrating issue for a lot of birth parents over the last 10 years particularly. But have any of you got any thoughts about that, about the importance of photos and how you feel about it?
I wish I could get photos. I didn't even meet her adoptive parents. Nobody sorted out. It was meant to be getting sorted out for me, but it never did. So I've no idea where my daughter is or anything, or how she is, except for what I heard at the beginning of lockdown, because of things I've done already around telling my stories. That's the only reason I found anything out. It's like they've got my little girl and they don't care now about us.
Because it's a common theme today that I suppose that people wondering what their children look like is really quite a difficult feeling for people to carry, and it adds a layer to it. It feels like kind of themes wise that's come out today about photos and not knowing what their children look like.
Yeah, I really think that each case should be looked at individually rather than a blanket no photo rule, which some local authorities do have. I think you need to look at the particular birth parent and the particular circumstances. I have to say the majority of my clients don't receive photos, and it devastates them. And a lot of the reasons that they've been told is because we're worried that you'll put this on social media. But they all say to me, there's absolutely no way I would do that, because they're just for me. And if I knew that I did that and that it would stop, there's no way I would ever jeopardise that. It's literally like what some of the mums have said today, just wanting to be able to picture them and not driving themselves mad, looking at every child in the street thinking, is that my child? Hearing the name shouted, thinking, is that my daughter? Is that my son? It really torments them more than it needs to, I think. And some of my clients do have an arrangement where they go into the letterbox team's office to view the photo, so view only. And again, that just reinforces for them that they're a bad person, they can't be trusted, and they're not allowed to take a picture of the picture. They've just got to sit and be supervised looking at it. And although they'd rather have that than nothing, again, it just doesn't feel enough.
That takes me nimbly on to the next question, which was about direct contact, actually. Well, obviously, that was a response to people watching Laura's really powerful film and her experience. And so I'd just like to explore that a bit, really. Do the panel think that there should be more direct contacts during adoption? And if so, how could that come about? What do you think, birth mums?
I got to help put my daughter's birth about me book together, but they brought a photo the foster carer had done for me. She'd done it for me, but I was only allowed to see it when I took my things up.
Right.
And I weren't allowed to take it away.
No, so you haven't had photos either. I mean,
that I'd be invited into the office to look at them, to view them, but never anything. I just imagine she looks like my other daughter.
About opening up conversations, isn't it, and discussions and things being reviewed and what's right for the child and what's right for the families. And it's about knowing that those decisions, what might be right for a baby might not be right for a 10-year-old or 11-year-old. And I think it's knowing that conversation hasn't been shut down and that it's going to be revisited, and that people are local authorities are invested in making sure that the contact is right, I guess. And it's sort of it's that afterlife of the adoption order, isn't it? Like how people are left and where they're left with that. I think it's knowing that it could be reviewed. And I guess I don't know what you think about that, Angela, maybe.
No, I was just going to say, I think it came, I know earlier we were going to ask the question, Mike, about the way we refer to it as contact. And I think that in itself is part of the problem, because it's quite a cold term. I think if we were talking about it in the terms of relationships and family time, then people would be more invested and would understand it more. Whereas at the minute it seems to be, oh well, we've fulfilled our obligation, we said there'd be contact once a year, we've written a letter. Whereas if we're putting an expectation on that actually we're going to try and build that relationship, so we start off in a cautious way to make sure things are working, but then that's revisited and reassessed. Because as Laura said, when you have two children who were adopted, and I'm in the same situation where I have an elder and a younger child adopted, and what was right for the eldest child might not have been right for the youngest one. So, but then making the eldest one have to have what was only right for the youngest wasn't really right. So I think it's really about it being a constant journey throughout, rather than it just being right, this is what we're going to do and we're never going to look at it again.
Yeah,
I think there is some recognition of that in the sort of adoption sector, if you like, and a lot of the reason it's not happening is to do with resources and the fact that people find that difficult to support. But I think Laura's example is incredible, really, because obviously herself and Peggy basically went and did that themselves, and it's a superb success story, which is brilliant. And I hope that we can begin to learn from experiences like that. Well, we are by listening to you and others.
But I think if you think that me and Peggy did that on our own without any support, just imagine what could be possible if they did support us.
Yeah, well, indeed. So I'm going to move on because quickly, just because we've only got a few minutes left, I'm afraid, because we overrun so much. And this again is sort of about contact, but it's so we've got a question asked by an intermediary, so someone who's working with adopted adults and birth parents towards reunions when the child is 18. So she says, or he says, any tips for an intermediary on making the difficult first contact to a birth parent when an adopted adult has traced them? So in Ask My Service, we work with adopted adults and birth parents, and we contact birth parents when the child is 18, if that's what the adopted person wants. So any thoughts on that first contact or what that might be like?
As I've actually had that happen to me
quite
recently,
well,
I can share that quite. Letterbox contact had broken down, but the offer was always there from me to my son. Once you're old enough, if you change your mind, you can come back, and I will always be here. Postbox had all of my up-to-date contact information, just so that was an open channel. And then in December, my son turned 18 4.5 years ago, and nothing. So year after year after year, nothing. And I had just assumed, he mustn't want to reconnect, and then December last year, I got an email from the local authority in my maiden name. They'd been trying to contact me at my previous address to say that my son wanted to contact me. And 48 hours later, we FaceTimed. It was, overwhelming and magical and wonderful. And I then found out he'd been trying to contact me that entire 4.5 years. But the local authority, instead of looking at Postbox, they were a reunification department, and they hadn't any up-to-date information, so had just said to him that I was a safeguarding risk. Well, I have a 10-year-old girl with no local authority involvement, and none of that information had been shared. So I think it's really about ensuring that, again, that's revisited and that's updated, because my daughter was 9 by the time she got to meet her brother, so half of her life she had missed out on this relationship, and had asked repeatedly when she would meet her brother. And as it turned out, he was looking, he was trying, and no one was prepared to help him. And it was actually his adoptive mum in the end who helped him track me down and find me, which I can't even begin to put into words what that meant to me. But just thinking of, if there'd been an intermediary service like you've been talking about that was there, we wouldn't have lost all of that time, and we'd have had support to be able to make that work. So I think a service like that is really, really important.
Badge or Lynn, I'm wondering if either of you have any thoughts about your children when they reach 18 and what you might think about that.
It's got to be on my daughter's terms. I'd love her to come and meet me, and I'll answer any questions that she's got, because she deserves that at least. but it's all got to be on my daughter's terms.
Badge, have you got any thoughts?
I'd say the same thing as Lynn. It's got to be on their terms. It'd be on my girl's terms. But if there was any questions she wanted me to answer, I try and answer them in my best possible way. Even if there was really difficult to, I try to answer them honestly. And then, obviously, after that, I would just hope that she still wanted to reunite with me, and not think that I was all bad, and that obviously I was in a difficult position and stuff like that. But I've still got quite a long way to go until she turns 18. So
yeah, great. Thank you for that. We've run out of time for the panel because we've been overrunning generally during the day. Personally, thank you guys for coming. You've been absolutely brilliant, and all of you, and especially Angela, for your brilliant comparing. Thank you. So I'm going to hand back to Angela, and then she and Emma are going to finish off the day. Thanks.
Brilliant. Thanks very much for that, Mike. I'm going to end today for me by sharing a poem that I've written. Throughout the day, we've heard about the importance of support and finding creative ways to share our experiences. And one of the things that Family Rights Group has done with our panels is arrange for us to do similar things, where we've looked at ways of putting into words some really deep and traumatizing things. And I found poetry really helps. Just before I share, it's worth giving you sort of a quick idea of what the poem is about. But shortly after I was told that my children were going to be adopted, I attempted to take my own life. I couldn't see any way past the grief. I couldn't see any way to move forwards with that. And it was a nurse in the hospital who helped me find the strength to keep going, and showed me that actually at some point in the future, my children would want to know me and would want to find, you know, a confident and happy mom, and not just the mom that they'd heard about through what was written in their files. And so this is kind of this is my letter to me back then, and what I wish I knew then that I do know now. Right, here we go. Oh, my dear darling girl, how I wish you could see just what life has in store for you and for me. I know as you lay there just wanting to die, that you don't have the strength for that final goodbye. How I wish I could hold you and whisper, dear friend, this is just the beginning, it's far from the end. Your life will be hard, and I'm not going to lie. There'll be times on the way when you'll wish you had died. But you'll find your own way, your voice and your aim. You'll discover the phoenix will rise from the flames. You will learn there are others just like you who care, who'll see that the cards you were dealt were not fair. They'll help you reshuffle and deal a new hand, and your journey will take you all over this land. The voice you have hidden through fear of rebuke will become your weapon as you speak for the truth. You will speak of your struggles, your loss and your pain, and the people will listen and you'll help them retrain. You will teach those who failed you to be better prepared when faced with a girl for whom nobody cared. You will show them compassion no matter your grief. You will no longer see them as villains and thieves. And just when you think that you're done with the fight, when the pain gets too much and the tightrope too tight, the people around you will rush in with a net, and they'll catch you and show you that you're not done quite yet. And you'll pick yourself up and continue your mission, and you'll try not to dwell on your loss and who's missing. Then one bright December in many moons' time, your boy, he will find you, and he'll be doing just fine. He will hear of your work and your fight to help others, and he'll realize he needs not one, but two mothers. He will light up your life like he did as a boy, and your life will once more be filled with the joy that motherhood brings, the things you miss most. He'll be handsome and happy, and you'll go on to boast of your sons and your daughter and how you were glad that you fought for the good and ignored all the bad, that you didn't give in when laid in that bed, that you found the courage to live life instead. So my dear darling girl, I beg that you listen. If you give up now, you will only be missing a life filled with laughter and challenge and pride. And all those who called you worthless, I tell you, they lied. You will marry, have children, and live more than most. And you can't do all that if you're left as a ghost. You're loved by yourself and you know your own worth. This is no time to die. This is time for rebirth. Leave that old shell behind, the one full of doubt. Cast it aside, let the real you climb out. Let your colours shine brightly and say it with pride. I'm so glad that I lived when I wanted to die. Thank you to everybody for coming today.
Wow.
I'm sure you'll agree that today has been just wonderful. For the first time, birth parents have had a space to share their lived experience in National Adoption Week, and what a message they've given us. I want to thank each birth parent who's contributed to this conference today. I know how hard it's been and how much you've prepared both emotionally and physically for this. It's such a privilege to hear your stories, not just today, but every day that we work. And if just one birth parent or a doctor, prospective adopter or social worker can take something away from today, then that's success. We're opening up a very much needed conversation in adoption about the important lived experience for birth families, and how this conversation will hopefully continue well past today. I'd like to thank all the people behind the scenes to help me with my technology skills that clearly aren't there. I'd just like to thank everybody that's contributed and helped make today possible, and to everybody who signed up to listen. It's meant a lot to us, and it's important now that we keep this conversation going. Thank you.